couple of nights, need to rebuild myself to come alive. It all makes sense now, now that the lights out. It's a different world to me, it makes me feel down. Wait until the storm comes down, until the sleep comes and makes it alright. Waiting for the morning
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third round of the Endurance Championship hosted by RF2 Asia. I'm your host and commentator for tonight, Lachlan Andrews. Join us as we are just moments away from the start of the Suzuka 2.4 hours. This is the third round of the series so far, and we are at Suzuka, as I already mentioned. And the drivers are currently underway with their warm-up session in preparations for today's race. With a lot of action on the circuit, we've had two classes, P2 and GTE. So far, all the drivers are out making their final adjustments and potential driver swap practices in preparation for today's race. With a big field today of 23 cars, we're expecting a lot of action across both classes for today's race. We have currently 13 Prototype 2 cars and excuse me, and about 23 GTE cars. Actually, my mistake. We have a full field of 24 cars so far, with a few more cars still to arrive in the server as in preparations for this race. As I already mentioned before, we are at Suzuka for the third round of the Endurance Series with a circuit length of 5.8 kilometers with 18 turns. This is going to be an absolute challenge for both classes, especially for the prototypes, as in the first sector, the first 7 corners are tight and twisty, which will make it quite difficult for the prototypes to get around the GTE traffic. However, patience is something that will play a factor in for the drivers throughout the event. We are currently experiencing some issues at the moment. We're trying to restart the server to see if we can fix this issue. But bear with us for a short moment, as we're going to try and get ourselves back into position so we can prepare for this race. Starting currently, the weather today in Suzuka is just about perfect, with clear skies, which will ensure the drivers are putting their vehicles to the highest of limits as the race progresses. It is 2.4 hours, so pit stops will be necessary for this race. At least 1 to 2 pit stops, maybe 3 for certain teams, to ensure that they are able to make it to the end of the event. We have a wide variety of drivers competing in this weekend, which not just from Asia Pacific, but also throughout the entire rest of the planet, with several teams coming from Europe and the Americas. Most prominently, we do have a 4-car team, 2 in the prototype class and 2 in the GT class, all the way from Spain, which is absolutely great to see, with a wide variety of drivers coming from all walks of life, coming to participate in tonight's race. Currently, we have all the drivers heading out of the pit lane, getting ready for their warm-up laps, getting that last few feel for the circuit before the race begins. It will be a rolling start, and it will be a bit of a challenge to ensure that the realism of the series is there in the series. Currently, we have wide variety of GT cars and prototypes throughout both classes, with mostly all manufacturers in some form in this event, mainly in the GT class, where we have a wide variety of Porsches, Aston Martins, Corvettes, Ferraris, and also BMWs as well. We're just a few moments away, so bear with us and don't go away. It won't be long till the race starts, and as right now we are seeing all the drivers out on the circuit, all classes. We have a wide variety of drivers out here today, such as we have Indra Friento in the Porsche, as well as Mark Robertson out in the Aston Martin, which is a very nice looking livery. We have Andros Alvarez in one of the Spanish entered BMWs, which is a wonderfully looking BMW currently out on the circuit. Chris Osley, Mohammed Azkar, Sebastian Rodriguez, Burawa Jalu out on the circuit at the moment, going away at that lovely looking Aston Martin V8 Vantage. We also have Hanon Sam out on circuit, Arun Taruda, who is currently the championship leader in the prototype class with that wonderfully looking Logitech Gisborne prototype too. We also have David Plummer, Chris Payne, Brett Gray, Eduardo Del Rincon in another one of the Spanish entered prototypes, as well as Miguel Angel Carrequez, Jose Barangu, Rick Scott, who is one of the drivers we have been seeing quite a bit in the endurance series thus far, who is currently sitting he is sitting somewhere in the championship. I'm trying to get the notes together to ensure that I have a full information of the event, but we are only just 10 minutes away, or less than 10 minutes away, as we are approaching the start time of the event. Right now, we're currently ensuring that the grid has been set and everyone is currently getting to grips with the cars with that final few seconds left until the end of the session before the start of today's race. As we look at the action out on the circuit at the moment, quite a lot of the drivers are getting those last few seconds to make sure the car is set up perfectly for the event, as this is 2.4 hours, which will go into a day and night cycle, which will prove a bit of a challenge for all the drivers, as they will have to battle with the nighttime driving, as one of the BMWs have gone off the circuit at the first turn. Looks like Miguel Picaras, but he's gone back on the circuit to continue racing on. So far, Rick Scott tops the timesheets at the time of 1 minute 54.3, followed by championship leader in the prototype class, Arun Taruna, with a time of 1 minute 56 dead. The fastest of the GTs so far in its practice session is Andros Alvarez with a time of 2 minutes and 4 seconds, followed by his teammate Miguel with a time of 2 minutes 8 seconds. The times in this warm-up session can give you a good detail on what their pace might be like throughout the race, bearing in mind that some of these drivers do have a second driver ready to go, because as this is an endurance race where most of the teams will have a co-driver that will take over for the second half of this race. With this being a 2.4 hour race, we're only just a couple of rounds left until the final round of the series, which will be a 6-hour marathon race, which will put a lot of effort on the drivers. But as this is being a endurance series, this 2.4 hours compared to the 6-hour race at the end of the season feels more like a sprint race, as we do see more of the drivers scoring more lap times at the moment. We do have Stantar Senel topping the time sheets at the time of 1 minute 51.2, which is an absolute good effort in the black Gisborne entry. But as I do see Rick Scott try to battle his way through the traffic. This is good practice for him to come to grips on how it will be like in the race, where the prototypes will have to deal with GT traffic, especially in the first sector of the circuit. This will put a lot of stress on the prototypes, as it is very difficult to make an overtake or go off the racing line at that section of the circuit. Turns 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, the S curves. The prototype drivers will have to try and be as patient as they can throughout the race, to just wait it out and just wait till they get past turn 7, where they will be able to overtake the slower GT cars for the event. As Aaron Taruna goes to second on the timesheet with a time of 1 minute 52.2, followed by Edmund Wong in the orange Orica entry with a time of 1 minute 52.3. Seeing the pace of the drivers out on the top of the timesheets, it is a good indicator of how these drivers might go in the first stint of this race. Bearing in mind that there will have to be making some pit stops throughout the course of the race, including several teams who have elected to have a co-driver on board. With 6 minutes left in the session, all the drivers, about 12 drivers so far, have posted lap times for this session, which is a good indicator of how we can see what pace we would expect to see the drivers for this event. So starting off the GT class, we have Alexis Clepano, the championship leading GT car, who has won the first 2 rounds so far in the series with a time of 2 minutes 0.2. So there is a bit of a 8-second difference between the fastest prototype and the fastest GT car. So about 8 seconds a lap is it's not as much of a big gap, but over the course of the endurance race, which is 2.4 hours, this will come into effect where the prototypes will have to start lapping several drivers throughout the course of the event. It's currently sitting in second in the GT class. We have Paul Faustino in that grey number 19 Porsche with a time of 2 minutes 2.248 minutes, followed by Jalul in the blue at 04 Aston Martin with a time of 2 minutes at 3.5 seconds. As we look up and down the timesheets, the GT field is separated currently by at least 10 seconds between the fastest GT driver and the slowest. But Hannah and Sam, who is currently the slowest GT driver, is only taking advantage of the practice session to get that last feel of the car as he prepares for this race. So lap times aren't something that is necessary for the teams, but it is a good indicator of where they can go with that performance. What can they do in terms of what parts of the track can they go faster and slower. We have Jose Berenguer at the top of the timesheets so far with a time of 1 minute 50. So he has just passed Stan Dar Sanel, who was the top of the timesheets, by nearly a second. So this is a really good lap time by, but as the session is now over and the drivers are now forming themselves on the grid, getting ready for the race. We are only just about 30 seconds away from the start of the 2.4 hours of Suzuka. Currently, we have 10 prototypes in this race so far, followed by another about 15 or so GT cars. So it's a very big field with a 26 cars strong grid. As the cars are leaving the grid, we do see the safety car pulling away. As the drivers are going around for that hot lap, I will go through the whole grid for you. On pole in the prototype class, we have Arun Taruna in the red Logitech Gisborne, followed by Stantar Sanel in the as well the Gisborne, followed by Jose Berenga in one of the Spanish entered Orekas, followed by Kelvin Wong, Edmund Wong, Eduardo del Rinco in another one of the Spanish entered Orekas, followed by David Juremba, Rick Hyde, Chris Osley, and Rick Scott to round out the top of the prototypes. On pole, we have Alexis Clepano in the MSI-sponsored Ambu Racing BMW, followed by Jalul in the Aston Martin. We have Sebastian Rodriguez starting in 13, followed by Brett Gray in the green Aston Martin. We have Gu Garkay, followed by Andrew Alvarez. Mark Robertson, who is starting from the pit lane, might have been because of a penalty incurred from the previous round. I'm not too sure. But we have Paul Faustino, Indra Ferrento, Miguel Angel Piquez, followed by Jared Vanderweide, Chris Payne, and David Plummer, Muhammad Azkar, Hanon Sem, and Yong Yi Wong to round out their field. As we are about not too far away from the start of the Suzuka 2.4 hours. Join us as we are about to get underway with the race, as the drivers are making their final lap around the circuit on the warm-up lap behind the safety car, as they are getting into the grid formation for today's race. So far in this championship, we've seen a lot of action so far with Aaron Taruna and his teammate Fahed Ghaffar, and the Vortex Sim Sport team, who is on pole at the moment. They have won the first race, but managed to only walk away with 4 points in the last round after a few issues at the Misano circuit. But the drivers are heading around the final corners and getting ready for the start of the Suzuka 2.4 hours. The drivers will be lining up, taking their grid spots as they are, and the race is green for the start of the Suzuka 2.4 hours. And Aaron Taruna already on the grass heading into the first corner, still maintains the lead, as we followed by Stantard, followed by Kelvin Wong, followed by Jose Barengo, Edward Rinco. But back in the GT class, there is an off, and Alexis Clepano has gone off the circuit in the GT leader. This will Aaron Taruna has spun as well. He has dropped himself back down to 10th. There must have been some sort of issue coming together with another driver, but he's now back down in 10th. That puts Stan Senel in the lead of this race, followed by Jose Barengo, while Paral Jalul has the lead of the GT class, followed by Sebastian Rodriguez, followed by Q J Carr. As they head into the final laps, the drivers now, the prototype leader of Stantar Sanel is heading into turn 13 and 14. And he's gone wide. He has gone wide. He must have gone in too hot. That puts Stantar Sanel into the lead, and Eduardo Del Rinco also follows Jose Berenga into for second place. This has been an absolutely amazing start to the race thus far, but Aaron Taruna has moved himself back up into 9th place, who is closely chasing behind Rick Scott after having coming off the circuit. But we have Jose Berenga coming across the line to start the second lap of this race. So far in this race, we've had the pole sitter of Aaron Taruna going off the circuit in the early stages of the event. But we do see another car going off the circuit. I believe that was David Plummer heading to the chicane. But the field seems to have sorted themselves out, as Aaron Taruna has slowed a little bit. he must have had another issue coming into the first corner, but that gives Rick Scott a bit of breathing space for 8th place. In the lead still, we have Jose Berenga in the Spanish-entered Orica, followed by Eduardo del Ringo, his teammate, in the Spanish-entered Orica as well, followed by Standar Senel in the black Gisborne, followed by Edmund Wong in the Hong Kong Sim Racing entered Orica, followed by David Tarumba, Chris Osley's in 6th, Kevin Wong in 7th, Rick Scott in 8th, who is battling with Aaron Taruna for 8th place. Aaron Taruna is looking to go around the outside, and he gets, I think he's got him, but in 10th place we have Rick Hyde, and in 11th, and leading the GT class for now, we have Jalul in the purple or blue Aston Martin, followed by Sebastian Rodriguez, followed by Andrew Alvarez in another one of the Spanish-entered BMWs, followed by Gu J. Carr. Paul Faustino in 15th place, with Jared Vanderweide in 16th place. Indra Frentos in 17th, while we have Miguel Angel in 18th, battling with Muhammad Asghar, who is in 19th place. Yong Ji Wong is in 20th place, followed by David Plummer. In 22nd, we have Brett Gray. In 23rd, we have Chris Payne, followed by Hanan Stem in 24th. Alexis Clepano has dropped back down to 25th place so far, but he has a lot of work ahead of him for the race. But we do have Mark Robertson rounding off the grid so far, as the race has gone into the second lap of this race so far. Still in the lead, we have Jose Berenga in the Spanish-entered Orica, followed by his teammate as they head into the sharp hairpin, heading up towards turn 12. There's been an absolutely amazing start to the race so far. We have a lot of changing of the places. Aaron Taruna, who did start on pole, is now back down in 8th and chasing down Kelvin Wong, who is slightly more ahead for 7th place. But Chris Osley goes off the circuit. That will give Kelvin Wong the 6th place for the race, and gives Aaron Taruna a bit more of a chance to catch up to Chris Osley for 7th place so far. Jalul still leads the GT class by about 5 seconds or so over Sebastian Rodriguez. So Jalul had a really brilliant start to the race so far, taking advantage of the issue with Alexis Clepano, and I believe the issue was some sort of penalty bug that has affected the Ambu Racing BMW, which is an absolute shame because he started from pole position in this race. But Mark Robertson has already gone a lap down from and dealing with prototypes at the moment. He must be having some sort of issue with the car, as 2nd and 3rd place have already lapped Mark Robertson in the Darrell Lee Aston Martin, who is having a bit of issues coming into the S's, but he has Edmund Wong catching him and passing him to lap him. But Jose Berenga still leads by 2 seconds over his teammate, and we do see Standar Sanel going off a bit and losing 3rd place to Edmund Wong. He probably went in a bit too. He came out of the corner a bit too hot and spun the car. But we do see the gap extending to about 5 seconds now over Jalul and Sebastian Rodriguez for the GT class. As we do see Brett Gray and Alexis Clepano already in the pit lane, belief for damage or potential penalties that the drivers do have to make. Several of the drivers did have penalties incurred from the previous round at Misano, where it was an action-packed race with incidences throughout the entirety of this race. Several teams had incurred penalties which carried on through this round. But still out in front, starting his fourth lap, we have Jose Berenguer in the Oreca prototype, followed by his teammate Eduardo Del Renko in second place. So far, we have Stantar Senel in the pit lane, who's dropping positions. He must have incurred some sort of damage. And he has retired by the looks of it. It must have been a serious issue, which is an absolute shame. Could be potential suspension damage that has put him out of this race. But we do have Aaron Taruna battling with Kelvin Wong. He did get around Chris Osley at some point in the early stages of this race. He's now battling Kelvin Wong for 5th place. So the issues that occurred with Aaron Taruna at the start of the race, he's now making it up for now with 8 minutes into this race so far, as we do see Standar Senel dropping down the field. I believe he may have just retired from this race. I'm not too sure. I'll get some more information on that. But Sebastian Rodriguez is coming under pressure from Andros Alvarez for 2nd place in the GT class. Sebastian Rodriguez must have dropped down a little bit so far, allowing Andros Alvarez to catch up. Jared van der Weide is still in 4th place in the GT class in the black and orange Corvette. But we do see Paul Faustino is forming a bit of a train battle with Gu J-Car and Indra Ferriento for the race, but Mohamed Azkar is still not too far behind in 17th place overall for the race. Chris Payne has made up several positions at the start of this race, but Brett Gray is still in the pit lane and he's just leaving the pit lane. There must have been some sort of issue in the opening stages of this race. Alexis Clapano, the pole starting BMW of Ambu Racing, is down into 23rd overall in this race. So whatever issues has occurred to that team, it's an absolute bad start for those guys. Hopefully they will be able to get back up the standings as the race progresses, as we are 10 minutes into this race and out of a 2.4 hour race. But so far out in front, we do have the 2 Spanish entered Orecas still 1-2 in this race so far, with Jose Berenguer still leads over Eduardo Renko by 3 seconds. Edmund Wong still sits in 3rd place with 10 seconds down the road from the race leader, who's starting to come under a little bit more pressure from David Jaremba for a 3rd place, but still 1 second down the road from him. So far in the GT class, the battle is heating up for 2nd place in the GTE class. Jalil still leads by a fair distance over Sebastian Rodriguez, who is coming under pressure from Andros Alvarez in another one of the Spanish entered BMWs. So far, the field is all calming down as we see Gu J-Car currently in the pit lane making some sort of stop. Could be for potential damage or some reason, which we do see. So far, we do see several drivers moving up the field, but Aaron Taruna is coming under a bit of pressure from Chris Osley in the number 28 Oreca. He's putting a little bit more. He has gained back some pace for over Aaron Taruna, who is now Aaron Taruna is in 6th place in the number 20 Gisborne. As we do see one of the cars off the circuit, Kelvin Wong has had an incident and he's lost his front bumper. He must have spun in the S's. Absolute shame. He was running up as high as 5th place at the time, 5th or 4th place at the time. So he will definitely have to go into the pit lane to fix the damage to his car. Hopefully it's nothing too serious besides the missing front bumper of his car. But the battle is still on for the GT class, as we did have a change of position between Andrew Alvarez and Sebastian Rodriguez, but Alvarez did go wide at the final corner. So now he's going to be coming under pressure from Jared Vanderwaay, followed by Paul Folisto. The gap between third, fourth, and fifth place in the GT class has narrowed down, which will give the several drivers behind Andros Alvarez a chance to potentially go up into third place in the class. But we do see Rick Scott sitting in 8th place, who is any second now going to be overtaking Kelvin Wong for 7th place in this race, as Kelvin Wong is going to be pitting most likely this lap due to the damage incurred on that spin he had, which is an absolute shame. He was running as high as 4th or 5th place in this race. But so far we've only had one retirement from Standar Senel, who had a great start to the race, starting on the front row of the grid, who managed to get himself into the lead of the race, taking advantage of the issue of Aaron Taruna, who's now running up into 5th place. He has managed to get a bigger gap over Chris Osley for 5th place, but Aaron Taruna now will be fighting hard to get himself back up into position where he can be potentially fighting for the race lead. This will be affecting their pace at the early goings of this race. But it is a very long race, as it is 2.4 hours, so there is plenty of time for Aaron Taruna and his teammate go forward to regain the lead of this race. There is a train starting to form here in the GT class, with 12th place driver and 3rd place in class Andros Alvarez leading a train, which includes Jared Vanderwaay, Paulo Faustino, Indra Friento, and Muhammad Azkar. So we do have about a 5 or 6 car trains behind Sebastian Rodriguez, who is a bit further down the road. But out in front still is Pura Jalul in the Aston Martin, who had a really brilliant start, taking advantages of the incidences that occurred on the first lap. This will put him in a very good position in the early goings of this race, but come the pit stops, it could easily change. The gap between the two Spanish-entered Orekas has now dwindled down to about 1.7 seconds between the two, as they starting to get into the groove of this race. They are about to approach some more GT traffic, and I believe that it will be the train of GT cars that are forming at this moment. This will, they are past the S's, so it won't be too much of an issue for them to overtake these other teams so far in the race. A lot of the GT drivers are already moving out of the way, but we do see Jared Vanderwaay already dropping several places. He must have had some sort of off at some point in this race, which has given Paul Faustino, Indra Friento, and Muhammad Azkar a place each in this battle. But the race leaders are currently pipping their way through the GT traffic, as we do see Jose overtaking the grey Porsche of Paul Faustino, heading into R31. This is turning out to be one of the, as we see Aaron Taruna dropping down the order. He must have had some sort of incident just seconds ago. I did see his name dropping down the list. Not too sure what happened, but it appears he might be out of this race so far. So this could open up the championship even further for several of the drivers coming into this event. I'm going to try and get some more information on what happened to Aaron Taruna, but he's now down into 17th place. Now he's dropping further down. He must have had some sort of major issue with his car, which is an absolute shame for the championship leader. But still out in front, with Jose Berenga still leads in the number 5 Oreca, followed by his teammate Edwal Del Renko. Edmund Wong is in third overall in the number 1 Hong Kong Sim Racing Eureka, followed by David Tarumba. Chris Osley is in 5th place in the prototype class and overall, followed by Rick Scott in the Ligier, the number 20. We have getting word that Aaron Taruna has retired due to an accident, which is an absolute shame. This will affect his championship to a slight degree. But Rick Hines still sitting in 7th place all on his own. As in the GT class, we have Jalil still leading the GTE class, who is about to be lapped by the prototypes for the first time. He's the only driver still yet to be lapped, but 1 minute 48 seconds down the road. But he's not really worrying too much about the prototypes as he's in the GT class, so he's just running his own race. But we do see another car off the circuit. I believe we did see a Ferrari getting involved in a little incident. Not too sure what happened there, but I think it was Gu JK, who's now in the pit lane, must have some sort of issue. He looks to be missing his front bumper. But Alexis Clepano is moving up several more spots. He's looking to now take the 18th place from Chris Payne. But Chris Payne is still a second down the road. But he's catching further up to Chris Payne for 18th place overall. So this is another step for Alexis Clepano, the Ambu Racing BMW. He's having a look in the final corner. This is a very tight, goes wide. He tries to overtake. We see Gu, JK, DNFing in this race so far. Not too sure what happened there. He must have had some sort of issue with his car that has forced him out of this race. But Jose Berenga has now extended that lead of the race to now 5 seconds over Eduardo Del Renko for overall and in the prototype class. Edmund Wong is now dropped a bit further back down in the times over the 2 Spanish entered Eureka's. So with Aaron Taruna now being out of this race, this will affect the championship quite majorly for the team, the Vortex SimSport team, as they are leading the championship so far. They do lead the championship by about 4 points over the World of Sim Racing team of Adrian Stabela and David Tarumba, who is currently sitting in 4th place on the road, which will put these guys into a good position to take potentially the championship lead as a BMW driver goes wide to allow the team to Kelvin Wong goes off the circuit trying to lap the GT cars. This is the one thing that is going to be a major issue for the prototype drivers in this race, is trying to get the prototype drivers to go past the GTs, especially in the first sector where it is very tight and the drivers are looking to take more risks. But as we are 21 minutes into this race so far, I don't see a really big point in these drivers taking these amount of risks so early in this race. Although Kelvin Wong has been in the pit lane for that damage earlier, which has put him currently the last of the prototype drivers on the road so far in 9th overall. But once again, Jalil still leads the GTE class, but Andros Alvarez has moved up into 2nd place in the GT class, followed by Sebastian Rodriguez, who is now coming under pressure from Paul Faustino in the grey Porsche. Indra Frientos is in 5th place in the class. in the Porsche. As we see another car right off the circuit, it's Sebastian Rodriguez. He's had a spin coming out of the turn 14, which is an absolute shame. That's going to drop him several. We have several more drivers into an incident. That was a close shave. Indra Ferrento reversing out onto the back out onto the circuit, nearly colliding with Rodriguez. There must have been some sort of coming together between. There must have been some sort of coming together between the prototypes at turn 18. Not too sure who that other prototype was. It could have been Chris Osley, potentially, but that was a very nasty looking incident between the prototypes and the GTs. That's another one of the main factors of this race with the multi-classes so far in this race, as we do see Chris Osley going into the pit lane. He must have been that driver that was involved in the incident just moments ago out on turn 14. That's going to be the real challenge for the prototype drivers, trying to get around the GT cars, even though the GT cars are battling for their in their classes as well. That adds that extra challenge for the drivers. But we are still 23 minutes into this race, and seeing the prototype drivers making risks, trying to overtake the GT drivers, is something that they can't afford to have mistakes. But the gap between this first and second between the two World of Sim Racing Spanish entered prototypes. My mistake, there is 3 World of Sim Racing prototypes and 2 GTs, so it's a very strong Spanish entry for today's race. But Jose Berenga still leads by 3 seconds, losing a little bit of time trying to overtake the green Aston Martin of Brett Gray. But it's still 1-2 for the Spanish team, who are sitting in first and second of the race. Edwin Wong currently runs in 3rd place in the orange Hong Kong Sim Racing Orekas, followed by the 3rd of the Spanish World of Sim Racing team Orekas, which is David Tremba, who is currently sitting 2nd in the championship. But as it looks right now, he could potentially be taking the championship lead at the end of the race if he doesn't have any issues between now and the rest of the race, and he stays in the position he is now. Rick Scott currently is in 5th place in the prototype and overall class with that. We do see a great Porsche. It is Paul Faustino having it off at the final corner before the start-finish straight. He will drop several places, which is an absolute shame for him. He did have a good start to this race. But in 6th place, we do have Rick Hyde in the blue number 25 Oreca. No, it's a side tech, my mistake, sorry. He appears to be one of the newer teams entered to this weekend, I believe. Yes, but he is running the slightly older looking Zytec compared to the other teams that are running the more new, like Aaron Taruna, Stantar, Sanel, who are both out of this race, running the slightly newer body work of those Zytec Gisbornes. But he currently runs in 6th place. Chris Osley, who had his issues just moments ago with a couple of the GT drivers up at turn 14, he's still running in 7th place, followed by Kelvin Wong, who had an off all on his own. In the other orange-coloured Hong Kong Sim Racing team Orekas, in the GT class, we do have Jalil still in the lead by a fair distance over having a really clean and fast start to this race, taking advantages of the issues that occurred with the Ambu Racing BMWs. But he is followed by Andres Alvarez, who is coming out of the final corner and heading onto the start-finish straight for the 2nd in the GT class. So the distance between the 1st and 2nd in the GT class is the start-finish straight. So Jalil has managed to get himself a very good gap in the early stages of this race, as we are nearly half an hour into this race. Muhammad Azkar currently sits third in class in the black Porsche, number 7 Porsche, followed by Jared Vanderweerd in the only Corvette entry in this race so far. Sebastian Rodriguez is currently sitting in 13th overall in the G. But he had issues moments ago where he did go off the circuit, which set up a chain effect with the Chris Osley and another GT driver. Indra Ferriento still sits in 14th place overall, followed by Paul Faustino, who had an issue on the final corner of this race. In 16th place, we have Yong Jing Wong and the orange number 11 BMW, as he has coming closing together with Chris Osley and the Ambu Racing BMW. Alexis Clepano is moving up in the positions, and he's putting a lot of pressure on Wong for 16th place in the event. As I mentioned, the Ambu Racing, they had a bad start, which involved them losing several positions, but they are now moving themselves back up the field. Miguel Angel is in the pit lane at the moment in 19th place, but Alexis Clepano is applying extra pressure onto Yongji Wong for 16th place overall. The battle is intensifying with these two drivers. Alexis Clepano is trying to move more positions. Young, who did start at the back of the pack, is now up in the 16th, but he's coming under a lot of pressure from the Ambu Racing entry of Alexis Clepano. In 18th place overall, we do have Brett Gray, who's been keeping it nice and consistent. Hanno and Sam sits in 19th position, while Mark Robertson, Miguel Angel is exiting the pit lane. David Plummer also is currently in the pit lane as well. But it appears it did appear there was a bit of smoke hanging out of the back of that BMW of Miguel, but it doesn't appear to be something too serious for him to worry about, as the smoke has gone away. But still, out in front in the prototype class, we do see Jose Barringa in the Oreca, followed by his teammate Eduardo Del Rinco, 3.5 seconds or so behind. Edmund Wong is sitting in 3rd place overall, 19 seconds off the race leader, as we do see David Plummer coming back out onto the circuit in the number 91 Aston Martin. But Mark Robertson is still in the pit lane. Could be some sort of issue he is having with his car. But it does appear that the whole field is evening themselves out and setting their own pace now. It has been quite an action-packed first half hour of this race, as the pole sitter Aaron Taruna is out of this race after an incident in the early stages of this race, who did start in the pole position, but is now retired, as well as Stantar Sanel in the black Gisborne, as well as Gu J Carr in the Ferrari. All three drivers are currently out of this race so far, which is an absolute shame, especially for Aaron Taruna, who was leading the championship heading into this round. But the gap has now closed down to just 2 seconds between Jose Barringo and Eduardo Del Rinco. He has spun on the final corner, and now he has to wait for all the teams to pass him before he gets back on the circuit. Now he's back up on the circuit. This will lessen the gap between himself and Edmund Wong for 3rd place, as we do see David Taremba going wide of the final corner, having to go cut through the chicane. But with those sausage curbs, it makes it very difficult for the drivers to get over them. But he will lose a lot of pace over that. Rick Scott still sitting in 5th place, or in that blue and yellow Ligier, but the battle was on for the lead of the race, but now it's down to 13 seconds after Eduardo Del Renko having a spin on the final corner of this race. But Edmund Wong still sits strong in third place in the number 1 Ulrika. But as we do see several of the prototypes already being lapped so far, including Chris Osley, Rick Hyde, and Kelvin Wong. But Rick Hyde has just been passed by Eldorado Del Renko, who is now once again lapping the GT drivers of Pole Faustino, Indra Ferrento, and Sebastian Rodriguez. Just Indra Ferrento so far. But it does appear that as we're looking at the GT class, that Jalil still leads by a fair distance and extending that gap per lap over now Muhammad Azkar, who has now gained second place in the GT class, followed by Andros Alvarez in one of the 2 Spanish entered BMWs of this race, followed by Jared Vander Wide, followed by Sebastian Rodriguez, Indra Ferrento, and Pole Faustino, who are battling each other for 14th place overall in this race. The gap is next to nothing as Pole Faustino is touching the back bumper of Indra Ferrento. He looks to be getting a bit of a draft heading into the first corner. He does have his nose just out in front, but Ferrento understands that it is a very long race, so there's no need to be defending that position for too much. Once the pit stops do start to come into play in this race, we will be seeing several drivers moving up and down the timesheets for this race. But currently, still in the lead, we have Jose Berenga, which is the gap is now down to it's been extended to 12 seconds as he is now behind GT traffic. This is one of the major things that the prototype will have to look out for in this race, as it is not a very wide circuit, Suzuka. So he has to make sure that when he's going to overlap another GT car, he's got to make sure it's going to be done in the right spot to avoid any issues, as we did see earlier that Chris Osley had a coming together with one of the GTs out onto turn 14, which spun himself and another GT driver. I'm not too sure who it was. I think it was Ferrento. It was one of the Porsches. It could have been one of the sim racing Porsches. Not too sure. But Alexis Clapano is still sitting in. He's now moved up into 16th place. Who did get the job done over Yongji Wong in the orange-coloured safety racing team BMW, which is quite an interesting livery to say the least. It's with several slogans all throughout the car, such as "No blocking," which is quite an interesting entry. These drivers are doing pretty well so far. Yongji Wong did start at the back of the pack, besides Mark Robertson, who did start from the pit lane. But they've moved up several positions to be in 17th place so far, as there must have been some sort of incident just before. Not too sure what happened. I think there must have been an incident, as we do see Indra Ferrento going off the circuit. But that has allowed Andros Alvarez back up into second place in the class, which is an absolute shame. No, he's running in third place in the class. I'm terribly sorry. But we will try and get more information on what happened to Pole Faustino. He has apologized for something, but not too sure what it is. But this would soon put himself under pressure, as Alexis Clapano is closing in on the grey Porsche, as Alexis Clapano is looking to move himself further up the grid after that terrible start at the start of the race for the Ambu Racing BMW, the number 61, with that brightly coloured brown and white MSI sponsored Ambu Racing BMW. But the gap is still now down to about 11 seconds between the two Orekas, between Jose Barringa and Eduardo Del Rinco, now down to about 11 seconds. The gap has been opening and closing a little bit by little bit in the opening stages of this race, but Jose Barringa still out in front in the number, I believe it's the number 42 Oreca, but he will be coming to lap Jalul, who still leads the GT class at this moment. But he does see that the Oreca of Jose is behind him, and he most likely will move to the side to allow the prototype through, which he does quite professionally of Jalul. But that could give an opportunity for Mohamed Askar to give a little bit more seconds, but he does go wide at the hairpin of turn 11. So it's not too much of a pressure on Jalul at this moment, as he does have a very substantial lead in the GT class. Most of the GTs have opened up several gaps along each other, but we do see Andros Alvarez in 11th place, in 3rd place in the class. He has a slightly small gap over Jared van der Weide in the Corvette, followed by Sebastian Rodriguez in the orange Porsche, the number 11. But it's looking like the field is evening themselves out. The pit stops will be due at some point in this race. We are 39 minutes into this race. 21 laps have been completed by race leader of Jose Barringa. So this will start to play in effect shortly with the pit stops, as they may be nearly due to make the pit stops. For a second there, it did look like Jose did go a little bit wide going through the S's, but it hasn't affected him so much in terms of the gap between himself and his teammate in the number 5 World of Sim Racing team, or Orekas. Sitting in 3rd place still, who's just entering the S's, is Edmund Wong, who's starting to come under a little bit more pressure from David Trumba, the 3rd of the Spanish entered World of Sim Racing teams, because with 5 entries all up, World of Sim Racing team is one of the largest represented teams in this event so far, with a total of 5 cars and 10 drivers, all from Spain. By appears to it, it's a large Spanish representation in this race so far, with a wide variety of drivers from all around the globe competing in this race today, as we are now 40 minutes into this race. So in about 4 or so minutes, we'll be 100 minutes away from the end of this race. The pit stops will be due maybe in about 5, maybe less laps or so, but Jose Barringa will cross the line to start the 22nd lap in the lead. Still 11 seconds up on Eduardo Del Rinco, who's just entering the start-finish straight now. So the gap between the two Orekas is roughly the length of the start-finish straight. The GT leader of Jalul currently has just started his 20th lap, being 2 laps down now, as the GTs are a slight more slower than the prototypes. It is expected that the GTs will go several laps down, but they're not really worrying too much about the prototypes, as the GTs are running their own race. But so far out in front, we do see Jalul, who is having a bit of issue allowing the prototypes to go through. This will cost them a little bit of time. But that is the main problem with the prototypes. I have mentioned several times that going through the S's, the first few corners of the circuit, will play a very important role for not only the prototype class, but also the GT class, as it is very hard to get off the racing line at that section of the circuit, where if you go off the racing line, the chances of going off the circuit are quite high. Edmund Wong is now coming under a lot more pressure from David Trumba. Third place in overall in this race. He's looking for a go of a back straight. And he looks to be he didn't quite get the job done going into that sweeping corner. But he will be looking to regain his composure and hopefully get get that gap back down to a slight smaller. They're only off by about a 1/10 of a second. Now, actually, half a second now is the difference between Edmund Wong and David Trumba. All David has to do is overtake Edmund Wong for it to be a 1-2-3 with the world of sim racing Orekas. But he has to contend with Edmund Wong for that third place that he's not letting go without a fight. We do see Rick Hyde making his first pit stop in 7th place. He will most likely be dropping that place to Kelvin Wong, but he's making his first standard pit stop. Jared van der Weij in the Corvette is also making his pit stop, but he has appeared to have missed his pit stop. He is reversing the pit lane. He overshot his pit lane, which is an absolute shame for the Corvette, the number 28. But Rick Hyde still making his first pit stop as Edmund Wong passes Alexis Clapano. I believe it was. No, probably wasn't Alexis Clapano. I do apologize. But the battle is still heating up quite heavily, but Edmund Wong has extended that gap slightly more between himself and David Trumba for the third place overall. But once again, out in front, Jose Berenguer still leads, but the gap is now down to 9 seconds over Eduardo Del Rinco, who is about to contend with another one of the Spanish-entered world of sim racing BMWs, which is It wasn't Alvarez. I'm sorry, it's a bit hard to tell the difference between these BMWs, as they all look very much the same. But I believe it was Miguel Angel Periquez, who's currently sitting in 19th place overall and 4 laps down over the race lead, who is about to be on the verge of being lapped by Yongji Wong in the orange BMW so far. But once again, still out in front, we do have Jalul in the blue Aston Martin, who's had a near faultless start. As the sun is starting to set a little bit, we are approaching the nighttime hours of this race, where it will get dark and not much of the circuit is lit up as such. So if the drivers do break their headlights, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble, as it is a very dark circuit for the drivers to overcome. So most of that concentration will have to start will be affecting the drivers, as they will be trying to move their way around at night and keep the racing line and maintain pace, while being more careful of the GT, especially with the prototype drivers having to deal with GTs on the circuit, as they will be a lot slower and it'll be harder to tell how far away they are over the team. But we do see Eduardo Berenguer in the pit lane. He's making his first stop. He's the first person to blink, but Edmund Wong has gone off the circuit, it appears. So that puts David Trumba in 2nd place in this race, as Eduardo Del Rinco in the pits. We're not too sure what happened. He has retired from this race, so that has put David Trumba up into 2nd place now, as he hasn't made his pit stop. I'm not too sure what happened with Edwin Wong, but we will get look to see what happened between him and... we'll have a quick look at what happened between Not too sure what has happened for Edmund Wong, but we'll try and get more information on what happened. But he appears to be out of this race now. From what the information I'm getting told is Edmund Wong had a collision with Marco. He did have it in the spoon section of the circuit, in the spoon curve. He did have a collision with Miguel Angel Perez, who is currently sitting in 22nd, but he's off the circuit again. He must have had some sort of collision between the two of them, and that has put Edmund Wong now out of this race, which is an absolute shame. He was running so well in third place, but that is another reminder of just how hard this race is, especially with the multiple classes running on the circuit at the same time. The prototype drivers do have to be careful as to not make any mistakes, especially colliding with a GT that could put them out of this race. But that has now put Kelvin Wong up into 6th place, Chris Osley into 6th, Rick Scott into 4th, and now it is 1, 2, 3 for the Spanish entered World of Sim Racing team. But Edmund Wong is now back out on the circuit. He must have fixed the issue that has from the incident. But Jose Barrenga, the race leader, is now in the pit lane, making his one of several stops in this race. That has put David Tremba into the lead of this race. But David Tremba does owe us a pit stop, so the gap could be lessened a little bit once he makes his pit stop. But so far, right now, it is still 1, 2, 3 for the all-Spanish World of Sim Racing team, which will hopefully, if it all works out for them, they could walk away with a podium lockout. But we still have quite a while left to go in this race. We still have about well over an hour and a half for this race, as we are 50 minutes into this race. A lot can still happen in this race, as Rick Scott is currently sitting in 4th, does overtake Mark Robertson once again to lap him. Mark Robertson still sitting last out on the circuit in 23rd place, but not too far away from Miguel Angel Perez, who had several incidents just moments ago, which involved Kelvin Wong, or Edmund Wong, my mistake. But Edmund Wong is now back out on the track, having rejoined the race. Not too sure the detail. All the details I have so far is Edmund Wong did collide with Miguel. That has affected both drivers quite terribly for the rest of this race. Hopefully, both drivers can be able to regain their composure and push on, as we still have a fair distance of this race left to go. But once again, we do see Jalil still out in front, but Mohammed Asghar is dealing with more lap traffic. He did go off the circuit just a second ago. I believe it was Miguel Perez, which is an absolute shame, because especially with the slower GT cars now being lapped by the faster GT cars. That is also another factor that does play a role in the GT class, where you do have the faster drivers, and they are looking to lap the slower GT drivers, but the pace isn't fast like compared to a prototype and a GT, where the prototypes can easily go past the GT cars with ease, while in the GT, while one GT trying to lap another GT is a bit more of a difficult task, as the cars are at similar speed. But still out in front of the GT class, we have Jalil, but the gap has lessened a bit more. But Mohammed Asghar is still dealing with Miguel Perez in the BMW, who does go wide to allow his teammate, but from a different class, Jose Eduardo through. But Mohammed Asghar is still looking to lap him, but it appears that Miguel did looks like he did go off the accelerator a little bit to let Howard Ascar and now Rick Scott through. But Rick Scott did have a little bit of a loose moment there coming out of the hairpin. But the battle is still on for Alexis Clapano, still in the Ambu Racing, who's now moved himself up into 14th place, gaining another 2 positions. So the fight back for the Ambu Racing team with Luis Morano still yet to get into the car, who will be appearing in the car in the later stages of this race. But joining us right now in the commentary booth, we do have Fahed Ghafoor. Welcome.
Hey, man.
Can you explain to us what happened at the start of the race?
I think at the start of the race, Arvin actually faced some sort of stuttering, and that's what he complained to me over the voice. So I guess it was just some PC issues.
Mm-hmm. As you are the championship leader, will this affect the championship between now and the end of the season?
I mean, we are highly disappointed with the fact that we had to retire the race. But I mean, it's a long season. There are lots of races to go, more to look forward to. Yeah, but it was definitely disappointing, the fact that Arvin did put in a lot of practice recently. It just wasn't our day, I guess. I mean, even I faced certain issues during quali, and I couldn't set a lap time yesterday. I managed to sort my issues out this morning and was looking forward to the race, but I just guess it wasn't meant to be.
What was the main cause for the car to retire?
What I believe was he's actually pushed it a bit too hard on the 130R, and he just lost it, and he's lost his rear wheel, and I mean that was it. He was probably trying to make up for the fact that we lost the P1 from the lap 1, and was probably pushing a bit too hard. I think maybe we should have taken it a bit slow, but I mean it happens to the best of us at times, and that's racing, and just gotta move with this, and look forward to the next race.
Well, we still have another 2 rounds left to the end of the season, so that chance of still winning the championship is there. We would like to wish you the best of luck. Fahed Ghafoor from Vortex Sim Sports, thank you for coming.
Thank you, mate. Thanks. Cheers.
As we get back into the action of the circuit, David Tremba is still in the lead by 48 seconds as the sun is now starting to set properly over this race. The darkness is closing in on the drivers, but I don't think David Tremba has made his pit stop yet. At some point, he must be running a larger fuel in the car, or is about a lap or so away from making his pit stop. But the gap is now to 48 seconds to Jose Bergana. But the World of Sim Sports, World of Sim Racing team is currently running 1, 2, and 3 in the prototype and overall class, while their GT team is running currently 4th and 12th or so in the GT class. So it's a very good representation of that team for this round. But as you heard from Ghafoor, that there was an issue with Aaron Taruna, who was trying to push that a little bit too hard after having several issues on the first opening laps, thus having the team to retire, which is an absolute shame from those guys. They worked so hard to be on the pace for this event, but they still do have several more rounds left to potentially clinch the championship. But this will definitely take a hit in their championship, as they will walk away with no points from this race, while their rivals in the championship so far is David Chirumba and Eduardo Del Renko. Points-wise, they could potentially... Both of those entries are of the Spanish-entered World of Sim Racing teams. These drivers could be on for walking away with a full 10 points, which give them a slight advantage over the championship. So, for example, if David Chirumba, who has now entered the pit lane for his first stop of the race, depending on how quick this pit stop will go, maybe he might come out still in the lead of the championship. He does have a 46-second lead over Jose Berenga for the race lead, but Berenga is now just entering turn 15 and now heading to the final chicane. Maybe Chirumba is running a very different strategy between his teammate, but it does look like Jose Berenga will regain the lead of this motor race. So that early pit stop did help him a little bit more, but David Chirumba is still in the pit lane. He might come out in third place as Eduardo Del Renko is entering the final corners of the lap. And it does... Chirumba is moving back out on the circuit, but he will lose third place as Eduardo Del Renko will move himself back into second place. But it is still 1, 2, 3 for the all-Spanish World of Sim Racing team entries. But Rick Scott is now, who is sitting in fourth place, is coming around the final corner to start the 31st lap of this race. But with the whole pit stops being done, Jose Berenga has regained the lead of this race as it's now fully dark and maintains a gap of 26.9 seconds over Eduardo Del Renko, followed by David Chirumba, who appears to be going off the circuit. I'm not too sure what's happened with him. He is off the circuit. That has put Rick Scott into third place overall in the race, but he appears to be off the circuit. I'm not too sure what's going on. It could be an issue with the car, or it could be the camera being wrong, but I'm not too sure. But Kelvin Wong goes off the circuit in fifth place. If David Chirumba stays where he is on the circuit, which is off the circuit, it does appear he's behind a barrier. Kelvin Wong will move himself into fourth place in this race as he goes around another GT car, which is going to be a major challenge for the prototype drivers in the dark hours of this race. We do have Chris Osley out of this race with suspension failure. That's an absolute shame for him. And David Chirumba is now also out of this race as well. I'm not too sure what happened with David. We will try and get some more information, but he just completed his pit stop. That will now officially put Rick Scott up into third place in the race, and that'll allow Kelvin Wong, Edmund Wong, and Rick Hyde to move up several positions. But Chris Osley is also out of this race, which is an absolute shame. He was running consistently. He did have that issue in the early stages of this race with one of the GTs out onto the turn 14, the spoon curves. But this has now opened up the podium position a bit more. So as the all Spanish prototype teams will no longer be gaining a 1, 2, 3. I hope that wasn't a commentator's curse, but the whole team was running so well as a whole. But with David Chirumba out of this race, it'll only leave Eduardo Del Renko and Jose Berenga to lead the charge for the Spanish World of Sim Racing team in the prototype class. But we can't forget that we do have two other World of Sim Racing team entries in the GT class, with Andros Alvarez still sitting fourth in the class, and his teammate Miguel Angel Periquez has had a few issues a bit further down the grid so far in this race. But as I was saying, he was potentially looking to take the championship lead, as David Chirumba was second in the championship, but behind by only 4 points. But he too will now be walking away with no points for this race, which is an absolute shame for him. But this could also put Eduardo Del Renko into a position to take the championship lead as well as he's on 20 points. So he could be walking over the potential 8 points or 6 points for the event. But this will definitely affect the championship a bit more. It may not be as too much of a hit on the championship lead of Arun Taruna and Gafford, but this will allow a bit more drama into this race so far, as Rick Scott moves himself up into third place in the championship, as he is not too sure whereabouts Rick Scott is on the championship table wise, but he is also making his pit stop as well. So he managed to get himself a bit of a longer stint on the fuel and tires wise compared to the two remaining Orekas, who is making his pit stop on, but he's back out on circuit. Maybe that wasn't a scheduled pit stop. Maybe there might have been some sort of damage or some sort that caused him to go in the pit lane. But this will hamper him in terms of challenging for the lead, who is now dropped back down to a minute behind Jose Barrenga, who is still leading the way after the first round of pit stops, as we are 64 minutes into this race. Basically, it's been a very exciting race so far, with action throughout both classes so far, but it's looking like it's going to be a very tight battle for the final hour and a half or so between Jose Barrenga and Eduardo Del Renko. This changing of the positions in this race, including the retirement of David Trimba, this could put Eduardo Del Renko and Marco Antonio Rodriguez, they're currently sitting second in the race. This could potentially put them even with, mathematically, if they remain in second place, they could potentially tie in the championship lead. So unless Eduardo Del Renko and his teammate Marco Antonio Rodriguez, if they could push that further and move into the lead of the race, then they could potentially walk away with the championship lead. But as it stands at this moment, we still have a long distance in this race left. But if the results stand as it is now, then the team of Eduardo Del Renko and Marco Antonio Rodriguez will tie with the championship lead of Arun Taruna and Fahad Gafford, who are out of the race, as we did mention earlier before. But it appears Rick Scott is back in the pit lane. We're not too sure what's happened with Rick Scott, but he's back in the pit lane for the second time in as many as a handful of laps. So there could be some sort of issue with Rick Scott's Ligier. But we will try and get a little bit more information on the situation with Rick Scott, but that has now put him a lap down over Jose Barrenga, and he's starting to come under a little bit more pressure, as Kelvin Wong is not too far behind in fourth place. He is entering the main straight as Rick Scott is exiting the pit lane, so he will come a bit more under pressure. His tyres will have cooled down a little bit in that pit lane, so he will have to be careful in the opening couple of laps to bring the heat back up into those tyres. That could give Kelvin Wong the opportunity he needs to take third place from Rick Scott. So the battle is now on for third place, as Dave Trimba, who is now out of this race, is falling further down the timing screens. This will put the GT leader Jalil, who still, I don't believe he's made his pit stop just yet. So the GT cars are running a slightly better fuel economy compared to the prototypes, where they do have to pit sooner. but Jalil's still out in front, who has barely been challenged so far in this race because of the incident involving Alexis Clepano, who's now moved himself back up in 12th. He's making a bit of a comeback, but he's still a lap down over Jalil, who still leads the GT class. But Mohamed Azkar is currently sitting second in class so far in this motor race, followed by Sebastian Rodriguez, who's a little bit further behind, but the whole top 5 or so is still within a certain distance of each other, but the gap is much more closer between third place and first place of the GT class. But we do see several drivers making pit stops, including Brett Gray and Miguel Angel Periquez in this race. So they could be making their standard pit stops for the event. The gap has now extended up to 28 seconds between the race leader of Jose Berenguer and Eduardo Del Renko. If hopefully Eduardo can close that gap a bit further, this could put him in the championship lead. As I did mention just moments ago, Eduardo Del Renko, as it stands, he could be tied with the championship lead. But we do see the GT championship leading car of Alexis Clepano making his pit stop. Could be his first proper pit stop of this race. So it'll be interesting to see if his teammate, Luis Morano, take over the car. We're not too sure, but we'll find out once the pit stops has been done. As we are 69 minutes into this race so far, we are roughly at the halfway mark of the race. But it appears that Miguel Angel Piqueras is retired from this race as well. So a lot of drivers are dropping out as we speak so far. So far we have about 5 cars, by the looks of it, having to retire from the race, which is an absolute shame. Most of the drivers have had issues throughout the start of the race, including Sanu, who had a great start, as well as Aaron Taruna, who also retired due to an issue where he was pushing too hard, fast causing an accident, as well as Gu JK in the Ferrari, which is another absolute shame. He was running consistently in the mid-pack of the GT class. But we also have Chris Osley, Miguel Angel Periquez, and David Trumba. So that's about 6 cars so far out of this race. But Luis Morano has now hopped into the Ambu Racing BMW. So the driver swap has been done. So he will most likely finish the race. As we do see Kelvin Wong missing his pit stop by the looks of it. We're not too sure what's happening. He's moving around in the pit lane. He could have just missed his pit, but he is a bit on an angle that will affect him slightly. But Rick Scott has now moved down into 4th place. The move must have been made between himself and Kelvin Wong. But Rick Scott is heading onto the main straight, so it looks like he will regain 3rd place in the race. But we're not too sure because with Miguel Angel Periquez, it does say he has rejoined the race. He must have had some sort of internet issue, but it has affected him greatly. That will put him dead last out of all the cars still running out on the circuit. Chris Payne will now move up to 23rd place, running consistently in that Darrell Lee Ferrari F430. So Miguel will have to work hard now to gain some pace, but it appears that Chris Payne has now lapped Miguel. So Miguel Angel Piqueras will now be 7 laps down overall. But Kelvin Wong is still in the pit. He is exiting the pit lane, but that issue in the pits has now cost him a position. He will now be dropping to 5th place, but he will start to come under a bit more pressure because Rick Hyde is not too far away as well. Because Kelvin Wong will take about 3 laps to get the tyres warmed up, and he does go wide at the first corner, and he spins the car. That will affect, and he goes straight into the barrier wall. That is not how he spins it around still. He will lose the position to Rick Hyde but everything has gone terribly wrong for Kelvin Wong as he tried to exit the pit lane, and he lost it badly coming into the first 2 corners. So hopefully he doesn't incur too much damage and he's able to continue going on. But that was first, he had a terrible entry into the pit lane where he missed his pit mark, and now he's come out onto the back out onto the circuit and spun the car. That's the important part with these pit stops, because once you change the tires, they will be stone cold when you come out back on the circuit. And it takes about 2 to 3 laps to get them up to proper racing temperature. But Kelvin Wong being behind, he tried to push a little bit too hard coming out of the pit lane, which has cost him very dearly now that he has lost several positions in that pit stop, which included Edmund Wong and Rick Hyde both passing Kelvin Wong for the race. But we do see Andros Alvarez in the pit lane as well. He's been running consistently in 4th place of the class, but now has lost that position to Paul Plastino. There could be a possibility of a driver swap between those drivers. But we do see Jalil still out in front in the GT class, but he's coming a little bit under pressure from a prototype, which is Eduardo Del Rinco, trying to lap Jalil once again for the race. But Luis Moreno is still holding consistently in 14th place, but depending on how long the pit stop with Alvarez goes, Luis Moreno could potentially get 13th place as he is heading onto the back straight of the circuit, as he is heading to 130R. Well, it appears that Chris Osley has left the race, so his retirement has been confirmed. But Alvarez has come back out onto the circuit, so that he will maintain 13th place overall. But Muhammad Azkar has now entered the pit lane himself, so he's running 2nd in the class so far. So this will be his, I believe, first pit stop. He will lose a couple of positions. He's already been passed by Sebastian Rodriguez for 2nd place in the class, but we do have Paul Flastino still a bit further back down as he's heading into the circuit. But we do see Yongji Wong, who has made a very unusual pass in the pit lane as he rejoins the circuit himself. I'm not too sure what happened with him, but it didn't look like he was going for the pit lane properly. But I'm not sure what happened. He probably just made a pit stop and changed his tires, but he's back out on the circuit in 17th place overall. Still a lap ahead of Mark Robertson, who is still in 18th position, so he hasn't lost too much time between himself and Mark Robertson, but it will affect his overall position, as he's quite a fair way behind Indra Ferrento in the event. But still out in front, we do have Jose Barringa, who's now extended the gap between himself and Eduardo Del Rinco to now 40 seconds. Eduardo must have had some sort of issue at some point, because as the gap was previously 20-something seconds between the two, but now it's been extended down to 41 seconds now. So I'm not too sure what happened with Eduardo, but hopefully he will regain his composure, because this will have championship implications slightly more as he's now further back down, but still running in 2nd overall in the event, as he is a lap or so ahead of Rick Scott, who's currently sitting in 3rd place, a lap down over the race leader. But we do see Sebastian Rodriguez, who is running 2nd in class, making his pit stop now. I believe it could be his first pit stop as well. A lot of these GT cars have been extending out these stints for quite a fair distance. Some of the drivers will be have already made pit stops so far, but I don't believe Jalil has made his pit stop yet. So he could be due in about 2 to 3 laps or so. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But he does still have a very large lead in the GT class, as Sebastian Rodriguez and Paul Flostino all making their pit stops as well. That will only increase the gap for Jalul, who's still leading the GT class from the start of this race. So far, we're only 78 minutes into this race so far. And joining us in the RF2 Asia TV commentary booth, we have Chris. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, cheers.
Can you tell us what happened out there on the circuit?
Well, coming around turn 2, I think it was, I was coming up to overtake, I think it was David Traber. And he just suddenly braked on me, and I don't know exactly what caused him to slow up rapidly, but ended up going straight at the back and flipping over the fence. It was a bit of a recovery time in the back of the Ambo, but I'm here.
You also had an incident earlier in the race with a GT car at turn 14. Can you give us a bit more information on that one?
That's at top of the hill.
Yeah,
I think the Porsche, there's the orange Porsche that spun out in front, and then I think the black Porsche in front of me just lost grip and cut across the front of me, and we both had a spin. Just wrong place, wrong time.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we have a major development in the GT class as Jalul was exiting the pit lane, but he's now in his pit stop. We are not too sure what happened with him, but it appears he might be off the map somewhere. Not too sure what happened, but Jalul looks to be out of this race. He was leading the GT class for quite a long distance, but not too sure. Something must have happened. He was making his pit stop. This will put Paul Faustino into the lead of the GT class. But going back to Chris, how did you think you went at the start of this race?
I was just pacing myself on the soft tyres. I didn't really have a lot of testing time to work on the setup as much as I could, so I was probably disadvantaged in that regard. But yeah, I was just pacing myself, hoping for a top 5 finish.
Okay. Well, we still have another 2 rounds left in this championship. You are currently sitting 5th place in the championship, so you could move up several more positions between now and the end of the championship. The best of luck to you for the rest of the championship. Hopefully you can walk away with better results in the next couple of rounds.
Yeah, cheers.
That was Chris Osley from TT Racing. But it appears now that Jalul is out of this race. He's been disqualified for reversing the pit lane. From what I've been told, he couldn't find his pit lane. That is an absolute major development for Jalul, who was leading the race for the better half of 80 or so minutes in this race, being unchallenged because of the team of Alexis Clapano and Luis Morano having an issue at the start of this race. This will definitely affect him quite badly, as he was sitting 3rd in the championship so far. But hopefully I believe he couldn't see his pit stall, but we will try and get some more information on what happened with him. But that was an absolute shame. This will now put Mohammed Askar into the lead of this race, but he's running 8th overall, but he will be 7th overall shortly, as David Truba, who is also out of this race, still sitting 7th on the timing screens, but he will be dropped down to 21st in the results. But it's an absolute shame for Jalul. But that has now put the GT class, has blown the GT class wide open in terms of the pace, as we do see Mohammed Askar starting his 39th lap, followed closely behind by Jared van der Weer. So Jared could be on for potential of getting another a potential win for him. But we do see Jalul coming back out onto the circuit. He's back in the race. Yeah, there must have been an issue with a pit stop, but that's not something that he could have helped, and the disqualification has been revoked. So he's now back on the circuit, but he has lost a lap over the GT lead. So this will affect him very dearly. But we are roughly just past the halfway mark of this race, so there's the potential of always gaining back more positions. But that will be a big blow to the team, as they were performing so well over the course of this race thus far. But this will allow several drivers positions, including Lewis Morano, who is up into 11th place and 4th in the GT class, having a terrible start from who Alexis Clepano did start the car. But as I did say early in this race, you can never count out the Ambu Racing team. They have won the first 2 rounds, so they've got a squeaky clean 40 points between the two of them, or 20 points in the team's championship. But you can never always count out the Ambu guys, because they always are really competitive in all forms of racing that they do. As they go a bit wide, he goes. As I say that, he goes off the circuit. And he will lose the position to Andros Alvarez, which will be a slight bit of misfortune for the Ambu Racing team. I believe I may have just jinxed the Ambu Racing team. For that, I am terribly sorry. But that will put Lewis Morano back down into 12th place, but not too far behind Andros Alvarez, who was not too far behind Morano to begin with. But Morano could easily take back that position, as he looks to be doing that as he heads into R31. But Chris Payne, it will be a bit of a potential issue between the drivers, but he does move to the side and let the drivers go for the event. But we do see the field even themselves out. Lewis Morano has regained 11th place overall and 4th in the GT class. Brett Gray and Chris Payne have both entered the pit lane, but Brett Gray looks like he just passed him a little bit in the pit lane. Not too sure what happened there, but both drivers are making their pit stop. Brett Gray will lose a position to Indra Ferrento for their position in the race thus far. But still out in first place, we have Jose Berenga in the sim racing world of sim racing. Orekas has now extended the gap to 42.9 seconds over his teammate Eduardo Del Rinco, who's currently sitting comfortably in second place, as Rick Scott is a lap behind on the overall race leader. But Rick Scott is holding down third place, as Edwin Wong is sitting fourth, but a further lap down over Rick Scott. So, and his teammate Kelvin Wong sitting in fifth place. Not too sure how far away these drivers are, but the gap seems to be extended a bit. But we do see Jared Vanderweyer in the pit lane at the moment. He looks to have missed his pit mark a bit. Yes, he has missed his pit mark. He does be into the position that will lose him a lot of precious time, as he just lost the position to Sebastian Rodriguez, and he could be looking to lose a position over Lewis Morano and Andros Alvarez, who has dropped back further down. He goes over quite wide in the R31. That was actually Andros Alvarez. I apologize. That could have been one of the other BMWs, but Lewis Morano now moves up into third place in class, while Andros Alvarez will gain another position in the so far. But I believe the driver that went wide at R31 was Miguel Angel Periquez. He's been having a bit of a troubling stint thus far in this race, but hopefully can move up several more positions. But with saying that, Mohamed Asghar now retains the lead of this the GT class, and after that issue with Jalul and his pit stop, Jalul's still back out on the circuit, but has lost several more positions so far in this race. But now that Mohamed Asghar will be in 8th place overall in the championship. We did start off with about 10 or so prototypes, but we have lost about we lost about 4 or so prototypes thus far. And joining us as a guest commentator, we want to welcome back Chris Osley to the stream. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, good to be back again.
So Chris will be joining us for the remainder of this race as a bit of extra help for me in the terms of the commentary team. Okay. The race has been actually action-packed so far in this race, which is really good to watch from my standpoint, and hopefully everyone else who's watching the stream thus far.
Yeah, I see there's a few DNFs as well so far in the race.
Yeah, we have about 6 so far in this race, but we did have a few drivers who were disqualified / retired, but they're back, like such as Miguel Angel Periquez and Jalul, but they're both back out on the circuit. Jalul has lost a lot of positions from that issue, but it seems to be a systems issue rather than him just missing his pit stop.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get back in, but
can't seem to get back into the lobby.
I'm just loading up now. But yeah, it was quite eventful race, especially coming across back markers in the P2s. Very hard picking up different braking points as well for them, and I can see a lot of other drivers struggling as well.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of struggle with I think everyone's had some sort of issue thus far in this race, because we've had several lead changes overall in the race, as we do see Jose Baringo go wide, and followed by Hanan Sam, who is stuck in a very peculiar position on the final chicane. He does rejoin the circuit without any major issue, but that will well, he's down in 20th position, so, and he's still a lap ahead of Miguel Angel Periquez, so he hasn't lost too much time, but he is still a lap down over the person ahead of him, which is David Plummer in the Aston Martin. But the whole field seems to be different pace, but we do see Luis Morano moving himself back up to 3rd place after having a terrible start. But it's good to see the Ambu Racing team moving further up the field.
It's great to see a massive field of cars this race as well. Silverstone was lacking a bit in the P2s, but yeah, this one had quite a few numbers.
Yeah, I think we started out the race with 26 cars and 10 prototypes, and I think it's 16 GT. So the GT field's quite large, with a variety of different cars like the BMW, Ferrari, Porsche, and a Corvette as well, and several Aston Martins. A lot of different vehicles for the drivers to test out. But in the prototype class, you've got the Zytex / Gisborne, which is the same car but different bodywork. And you got the Eureka's, which are currently running 1, 2, 3, and 5th. The open canopy prototypes are a bit of a popular choice in the field this weekend and throughout the whole championship thus far.
Yeah, I picked the open top Orica basically for visibility. Once you get that closed cockpit, you can barely see some of the right-hand corners and struggle over the wheels as well.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed as well, especially with the Ligier being that doing a bit of testing with the vehicles for each round. I test out several cars to see how each car handles. The Ligier, it's much harder to see out of. It's a little bit more claustrophobic in terms of a bit more claustrophobic in seeing out of the car, but you're definitely right with the open top prototypes such as the Gisborne and the Eureka's. But Rick Scott has moved down a position now. He's running down in 4th place. Edmund Wong has moved up back into 3rd place.
Yeah, he's
So far
battling Eduardo Del Recon, and yeah, he's right on the back of him at the moment.
No, that's actually Kelvin Wong that's behind Del Recon.
It is too.
Edmund Wong is just going through the hairpin going up the hill. That we can confirm that's the 23 Oreca of Kelvin Wong, his teammate in the Hong Kong sim racing squad. But thus far, it's been basically the all Spanish teams currently leading 1 and 2 in the prototype class. But while they've got about 3 entries in the prototype class and 2 entries in the GT class, so there's a very large Spanish representation in this race, as well as other nations being part of this race, which is great to see.
Yeah, we've got Mark Robinson going straight into the pits as well.
Yep.
In the Aston Martin.
The 127 Aston Martin. One of the tri-continental entries. One of probably the only team I can think of that is running in the same class with different cars, because several teams are running multiple cars entries, but Tri-Continental is the only team that I can think of that's running 2 different cars instead of 2 of the same.
Yeah, I think the Ferrari as well was on the team earlier on with Chris Payne.
Yeah, that's correct. Chris Payne is running the number, what was it? The number 66 Tri-Continental entry. But there are 3 entries from Tri-Continental in the GT class, 2 Aston Martins, the 127 who is in the pit lane now, and the number 91 of David Plummer in the black Aston Martin. So slightly different liveries between the guys. But so far I can count about
the Aston Martin's on the limiter, just waiting to go, and yeah, he's just must have gone in for tyres and fuel.
But he does lose a position over David Plummer, who does move himself up into 18th overall. So the battle is going to be on between these 2 guys for 18th place overall. The gap is not that long. But still out in front in the GT class, we do have Mohammed Azkar. He's had a bit of a quiet race thus far. He's been keeping it a bit quiet and consistent and taking advantage of the incident of Jalul, who did pit, and from what I've been told, he couldn't see his pit stall, and then when he reversed, I believe his pit stall wasn't there when he came in. And when he tried to reverse, he was promptly disqualified from the race, but managed to get himself back into the race. He had a bit of a really good race thus far, except for that one incident that has dropped him well down the running order. But let's basically put the GT class wide open. But we do have Luis Moreno running 10th overall in 3rd in class. He's closing the gap to Sebastian Rodriguez. But they're only separated by the start-finish straight by the looks of it on the screen.
Yeah, it's good to see Luis Moreno representing BMW in a field of Porsches, basically. And
Yeah, there's been large representation of Porsches, but bear in mind that we do have a wide variety of Aston Martins, which is the second most popular manufacturer. But we have about 6-7 BMWs in the race, about 6 or so Porsches, one Corvette, several Aston Martins, and 2 Ferraris. So there's a wide variety of vehicles in the GT class. I think all manufacturers are being represented in this event. But the BMWs, it appears it has that slight more advantage over the other cars, as we do see not just this series, but other series where you see the BMWs just gain that more advantage in the endurance races.
yeah, just having a close look at Alvarez, and he's starting to get a bit taily through the S's.
He could be due for another pit stop, maybe. He might have just run the tyres dead a bit. He's had a bit of an up and down race thus far. He's moved up in several places. He was challenging for second, but he's now running down into 4th place. I reckon he might be due for another pit stop or so for him. But we do Sebastian Rodriguez going a bit tail happy in the final corner, and that is one of the Hong Kong sim teams. I believe it was Kelvin Wong in the final corner, but Edwin Wong is also in the pit lane. But David Trubar, the third of the Orekas, who did retire earlier from the race, still sitting in the 6th place in the timing screens, but he's expected to drop several more positions as the race progresses, as he's dropped another position. But Rick Hyde is another driver who's taken advantage of Edwin Wong's pit stop to move himself up into 5th place. So I think Edwin Wong's made his 2nd pit stop, so we do expect to see more, about another 2 pit stops maybe.
Yeah, I'm surprised David Trober's still up there after the incident with myself. But yeah, we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, because he just made his pit stop when he had his incident with you. The cold tyres, I could have made a major part in that accident. But because the fact that he had such a large lead over not just the rest of the prototype class, but the field in general, that has one of the reasons why he's so high on the timing screen. But he's still like 3 laps ahead of Muhammad Askar in terms of the standings, but it just keeps feeling like he's just moving up the timing screen. But I think for the rest of the race, we're just going to continuously ignore David Trubar's. But we do see the race leader, Jose Berenga, in the pit lane at the moment. But he did hold a lap lead over Eduardo Del Rinco. So I think Jose might just come back out on the circuit in the lead of this race. But he has opened up a very big gap.
Yeah, basically a free pit stop for him with the strategy he's got. So and then you've seen Plummer in the Aston Martin as well, pitting at the same time.
Yes, he is pitting as well. But he's that will put Mark Robertson back up into 18th place overall in the race. So Mark Robertson did a bit of an undercut in regards to his position, but that will put Rick Scott, Kelvin Wong, Rick Hyde back on 1 lap down because of Jose's pit stop. But he now comes back out on the circuit, still 2 minutes or so ahead of Eduardo Del Rinco, who probably will be pitting this lap, maybe a couple of more. They do owe us a few more pit stops because we do have 43 minutes left in this race.
Yeah, Berenger's struggling on cold tyres after the pit stop, so Edmund Wong's right on the back of him.
Yeah, Edmund will be applying a little bit more pressure. He does have that warmer tyres, but Berenger will still have no pressure from Edward Wong. He'll probably be looking to get his lap back over Jose, but it doesn't. His tyre, Jose's tyres are warming up a bit quick. He's keeping in manage. He does weave a little bit to get those tyres to warm up that little bit quicker, because he doesn't want to lose too much time, as the gap is now down to 1 minute 56. But Eduardo Del Rinco, he's struggling behind one of the Porsches. I believe it was Indra Friento in the S's. That's one of the major points I've mentioned in this stream so far, where it is really difficult for the prototypes to pass the GTs in the S's in the first sector of the event.
Yeah, because the line's changing all the time. You've got the GT cars cutting the prototypes off, basically, and you've got to basically go around the outside of them to do an overtake, and it's very slippery on the outside of that corner.
Even without the marbles put down on the circuit throughout the whole race, it's still a bit of a challenge for all the drivers, because if you go off the racing line, especially in an endurance race where all the marbles have been building up throughout the course of the race, you've got no grip, and the chances of going off the circuit are almost certain.
Looks like we've got the leader, Berenger, trying to, or coming up behind a BMW.
I'm not too sure which BMW it is, but the gap is now down to 44 seconds between Berenger and Eduardo Del Rinco for the lead, 43 seconds now. So Berenger is still warming up his tyres. He goes a little bit wide through the S's, goes onto the grass a little bit. He's got to be a bit too careful, because if he goes too far off the grass, he'll slingshot himself into the barrier. But the BMW in question is the Luis Morano entry, the Ambu Racing. He is still running well in third place after his issues at the beginning of the race. He could be on for a potential second place. With he's not too far behind Sebastian Rodriguez, but at the same time, Mohamed Asghar is not so far ahead as well. So it's very close between the whole GT field thus far. But it's been a very exciting race thus far.
Yeah, Edmund Wong's just gone under Luis Moreno in the at the top of the circuit.
Edmund Wong also makes another lap over. But Luis Moreno he's a very professional driver. He's not going to be too worried about the prototypes. But with the regulations in terms of prototypes overtaking the GT cars, the GT cars have the right of the racing line in the corners, but when it comes to the straights, most of the GT drivers will just stick, depending on the corner, like if it's a left-hand corner, they'll stick to the right-hand side of the circuit after the corner to allow the prototypes to go through, or vice versa for a right-hand turn. So most of the drivers, GT drivers, do know how to allow the prototypes through, but there have been a couple of issues with GTs and prototypes over the course of this race, as you've seen firsthand.
Yeah, definitely. I've come across them all over the track, trying to fight my way through and keep pace with the lead four cars before the accident. So, yeah, it's definitely something you've got to take into consideration, is being able to space yourself with the GT cars to be able to overtake them on the outside or the exit of the corner, as opposed to diving underneath them.
We do see Jalul lapping Miguel Angel, who goes a bit wobbly, is there, but he's now running low in 16th place, but he is about to be lapped by the race leader once again. It's been an up and down race, Jalul, because he was running so well, but when he came to do his pit stop, it just all went downhill from there. Just missing his pit, like he couldn't find his pit stop, and then was out of the race. Then he was back in the race. It's been pretty exciting thus far, but for some weird reason, it still looks like that David Truba is a lap down, but I'm not too sure what's going on with him on the timing screen. He's in the pit lane, but he hasn't gone for even more laps down.
I think it's I think it's just a glitch after disappearing below the track surface.
It's been confirmed he has been. I just got a message on the screen saying he has left the race, but the vehicle is stored in the garage. So that will finally put an end to true, but he's now starting to go down the order now. But Jose Barringa is still he's extended that gap even further now to 45 seconds over Eduardo Del Rinco. But the important part with Del Rinco is this could affect his championship, actually, because as it sits now, Del Rinco could tie with the championship lead of Jalul and Gafoor if the results stand as it is.
Yeah, so Gafoor was phenomenal in the Silverstone round. Just a league of his own, basically, and yeah, it's a shame not to see him continuing on in this round.
Joining us in a second, we do have Ambu Racing's Alexis Clapano joining us in the commentary booth. And speak of the devil, here he is now. Welcome, Alexis.
Hi, thanks.
Could you tell us about what happened at the start of the race? You did have the pole position, but you dropped several places. Could you give us some more information on what happened?
Yep, I lost first corner. Then from there I had with the fourth position guy. We bumped into each other, and that's why I went down from the order.
But you and your teammate Lewis Morano have worked back up that pace from that incident at the start of the race, and you're now running third in the class, and is challenging Sebastian Rodriguez for second place in the class. So it's absolutely amazing to see the comeback between you guys, being such a professional team that you guys are. A little minor issue like that doesn't really affect you guys too much.
Yeah, good thing Luis had set up the car perfectly. We're like second lap faster than anyone else, so yep, that's what it. Or that's why we're cutting the.
Well, I'm currently watching the action between Morano and Rodriguez. So the chance of potentially still walking away with the race lead is very strong, as there is still about half an hour left in this race, so plenty of time for the Ambu Racing BMW to gain that lead, but the gap isn't that too big. So the best of luck to you for the rest of this race.
Yep, thank you. We just need to the laps onwards as we can. We should be able to.
Well, thank you for joining us, and that is the championship leading driver, Alexis Clapano, who is teaming up with Lewis Morano. And as Lewis Morano is fighting for second in the class, he is being held back by Sebastian Rodriguez, who is not giving up second position without a fight.
Yeah, you can see the different lines being taken. The Porsche is really struggling on the rear set of tyres that it's got at the moment.
Oh, that was a bit of a chop.
Moreno's got the run on him on the straight.
Rodriguez is still trying to get defensive, but as Moreno has a bit of a look, a bit too far back to make a move through R31. But Rodriguez has a bit more, has a good experience at Suzuka, as he was the Suzuka 1000 winner, being on his own. But now all that's success from that is working in his favour a bit, as he's running in the top 3 so far of this race.
Yeah, you can see the Porsche hold him up in the chicane, which gave the Porsche a bit more of a run onto the straight. And we'll see how he goes through the S's.
Yeah, that's going to be a very important part, because that once Alexis Clapano did say the setup is on point with the BMW, he's still a second up over the entire field in terms of lap times. So it'll be interesting to see how this BMW goes through this section of the circuit. The Porsche does seem to be holding its own a little bit for the so far, but it'd be interesting to see, because we still have another 30 or so minutes, 32 minutes exactly left to the end of the race. So it could really go down to the wire here.
Yeah, we're also coming into that period of the race where the sun's going to start rising.
Ooh,
And
car off the circuit.
yeah, Ferrari.
There's, I believe it's Hannah and Sam who just stopped some. It looked like he stopped, but it didn't affect the battle between these two drivers as they're still going at it. As we just say that, Lorano has spun the car into the hairpin. That will leave some breathing space for Sebastian Rodriguez to maintain second place in the class. They were having such a brilliant battle between the two. Absolute shame.
Yeah, you can see him on the lights, flickering the lights for the Ferrari. But yeah, a bit of a shame. It's just grabbed too much accelerator exiting the hairpin, and yeah, just lost grip.
But being Lewis Morano being a very professional driver, he hasn't lost too much time, but he is coming under pressure from that prototype going into R31. It appears to be the Eduardo Del Rinco, who's still 45 seconds. Lewis Morano lets the prototype through, but the gap isn't too much between Rodriguez and Morano. So if Morano digs down deep, he could still regain that time he lost with plenty of time left.
Yeah, it's in the prototype will slow the Porsche down as well, bringing it back closer to the BMW. And it doesn't look like he's been affected too much with the front bar hitting the wall, but we'll have to see how his race progresses.
As we see the battle between Rodriguez and Morano, another battle is forming between Jalul and Yongji Wong. Those two had a bit of a battle in the S's thus far, but Jalul had managed to overtake Wong, and is now getting away from Wong in the Aston Martin. But Wong has come back a bit more.
Yeah, just saw Kelvin Wong overtake Rick Hyde down the front straight. Obviously, another lap ahead.
Yeah, that's another battle for 5th place. Both the Hong Kong sim racing Orekas have been pretty strong, but they've just had a run of really bad luck between the two of them throughout the course of this race. But
yeah,
Rick Scott's still...
Yeah, I saw one of the front ends of one of the Hong Kong sim racing cars disappear on one of the corners early on in the race.
Yeah, I think it was Kelvin or Edmund, I can't remember which one, but they came out of the pit lane with the tyres still cold. They went wide in the first corner, and when he tried to get back on the circuit, he flew across the track and hit the wall on the inside, thus losing the front bumper. So it's been very interesting thus far, but Jose Berengar has been holding steadily at like consistent lap times. He's been within 4 or so seconds of his fastest lap time in the race, and I think, what was his fastest lap of the race so far? I think it was a 1:50.1, maybe a 1:49. I think he must have. Yeah, he did. He did get a 1:49.9 potentially at some point in the race. So he's had a really hot lap out on the circuit so far.
Yeah, Rick Scott's in the pits, number 4th. Rick Scott in the pits. So we'll see how Edmund Wong can go trying to get that place back.
It looks like he is stopping for tyres. I have noticed that the Ligiers can run a bit further on the petrol, but the pit stops are a bit longer. I think Rick Scott's going for more of a top the fuel tank and run. I think he's made less pit stops. Well, less standard pit stops. He has been in the pits a few times now as he loses another position to Edmund Wong, but could soon be coming under pressure. Not as much because Rick Hyde's still further back behind, so Rick Scott could potentially still come out in 5th place. But
will this be the final pit stop though?
It could potentially be, because we're just less than half an hour, so I think that could be his last stop of the race. I think the Wongs are still yet to hit, but I think Jose and Eduardo probably won't make it on fuel as they are now, so they probably will pit at some point before the end of this race. But with the lead that Jose still has over Eduardo, he could make another pit stop and still come out in the lead of the race in the closing moments of so far.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Rick Scott's upping the boost and trying to do the undercut on to Edmund Wong.
But I have noticed that he has been making less, like he did make a few unscheduled pit stops in the race, but not counting those, he has been staying out a bit longer than the Eureka's. So I think he might be running a slightly less boost, but going for a more fuel efficient. As we see Luis Moreno closing the gap over to Sebastian Rodriguez, the battle for second in class is heating up once again, but Sebastian Rodriguez is coming behind the orange BMW of Yong Ji Wong. So this will close the gap as Rodriguez is flashing the headlights, telling him to move out of the way. He has collided with... It's an incident. Luis Moreno will now take second place. Rodriguez has collided with Yong Ji Wong, who was just ahead of Rodriguez. He was under the blue flags. Not too sure why he didn't move to the right side of the circuit. I think that Yong Ji Wong could have been in the wrong here. Sebastian Rodriguez was flashing his headlights furiously, telling him to move out of the way as he was coming under pressure by Moreno. But now that Moreno now gains a spot, so he's now moved himself up into second.
Yeah, good battle in the GT field with Mohamed Fitzriaska leading it so far to Luis Moreno.
But there is still a bit of a gap as Ascar has just crossed the start-finish line. Moreno is just going to R31. The potential of just over 20 minutes left to go. Moreno, if he knuckled down and not make any more mistakes, he could potentially challenge for the GT lead in the final stages of this race.
Yeah, like you just saw, though, prototype cars and other GT cars can get in the way and dramatically change the race.
There will be... my prediction is there might be some sort of... investigation after this race between the incident involving Sebastian Rodriguez and Yong Ji Wong, because it just looked like Wong just wasn't moving out of the way. He was probably getting a blue flag for quite a long while, and that caused a collision between Rodriguez going to the back of the BMW.
Yeah, it is a hard point of the track to overtake as well, because you got that quick right-hander then into the tight right-hander before you go under the bridge. So yeah, we'll see what that investigation comes out later after the race.
Exactly right. But the misfortune of Rodriguez...
Yong Ji Wong's getting in front of the Rick Hyde prototype as well. He's not yielding.
He just passed... it looks like on my screen that Hyde has just moved across. I think maybe you might not be live, but Jared van der Weide is in the pit lane now, making probably his final pit stop of this race. He's been running very consistent in about 6th place. He was as high as 3rd place in the class, so he's had a very successful weekend.
Yeah, it's just scrolling through and seeing Edmund Wong overtaking the Ferrari of Hang On Sam.
Yeah, you might be actually a bit, but it could be live. Are you live?
Yeah, definitely live. And yeah, just see Kelvin Wong waiting for his pit stop as well. He's got a GT car in the way.
Yeah, Jared van der Weide has completed his pit stop, his final pit stop. Kelvin Wong now in 3rd place, a lap ahead of Edmund Wong. So that means Kelvin is completing his final slash and dash to the end, or could be doing a full pit change. He will go another lap down over Jose Berenga. So Edmund Wong could be in a position to potentially gain another position, but Kelvin Wong is seconds away from getting out of the pit stop. But Edmund Wong is now coming onto the start-finish straight and will take third place in the prototype and overall.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Rick Scott coming down the back straight as well. So will he get anywhere near Kelvin Wong?
Well, the fact Rick Scott has made his pit stop a couple of laps prior, so his tyres will be nice and warm already. But Kelvin will. I think Kelvin was the one who had the issue.
Incident with the second place. He's just been pushed off the track by a BMW.
Yes. Eduardo Del Renko looks like he had a coming together with his teammate, World of Sim Racing team BMW. By the looks of it, I think it looked like on the screen. Not too sure which driver it was, but I have my sneaky suspicion it could have been Miguel Angel, who has had several issues over the course of this race. By the looks of it. Not too sure. We will try and get some more information on that as it comes to hand. But that will lose several seconds over Jose. The gap is now down to, the gap has been extended to 54.5 seconds over Jose Berenga. But
yeah,
as it stands,
some action on track.
Yeah, the Endurance Series is a really good series where you always have a lot of action over the course of the entire race, not just overall, but it appears that it did look like on my screen another car went off the circuit, but I don't know who it was, but I think it could have been my imagination playing tricks on me, as we are now 20 minutes away from the end of the third round of the RF2 Asia Endurance Series. Please join us in the final 20 minutes as the race has been hot. And there's a collision between Jose Berenga and Sebastian Rodriguez coming out of the S's. Jose Berenga, who is leading the race, collided with Sebastian Rodriguez, who was trying to lap Rodriguez, and the two had a coming together.
Yeah, and it's about to get very tricky for the drivers. We've got the sun about to start coming up over the side of the track.
I think Rodriguez might have an issue. He's quite slow and he's tailing a bit. It could have, as he is getting flashed by Jared Van der Weyen, who is still a lap down. But I think Rodriguez is having an issue. I think, yeah, definitely. I think he is having an issue with the car. The collision between himself and Jose Berenga has caused him. I think he's going to have to pit.
Yeah, it's definitely bent steering in the front of the Porsche.
Maybe worst case scenario, damaged suspension. As you have mentioned, the sun is starting to come up now. So it will start to be a major factor. Rodriguez is trying to get to the pits as soon as he can, but it looks like his chances of a podium might be slipping out of his hands, as Alvarez is about to head into the turn 14, I believe it is. Turn 14, yes. He is heading into the spoon curve. So he could potentially be on to gain third place. So Luis Morano still chasing down Mohamed Ascar, but the gap does appear to be getting smaller, as Ascar is just gone through the hairpin heading up through turn 12. Morano is just heading into the hairpin now, so probably about 10-15 seconds is the difference between first and second the GT class.
Yeah, so it's going to be very glary very soon for the drivers as that sun starts to come up above the crowds of the track.
This will add a bit of a challenge with several of the drivers, because that sun in your eyes is really blinding, especially in rFactor 2, where it will mostly affect the drivers, I believe, heading into the final few corners. Mainly, I'm going to try and see whereabouts it can affect the drivers.
A bit of argy-bargy with Rick Hyde in the. It's in the final corners where the glare's the most vicious for the drivers to see, where that Ferris wheel is on the track.
Yes, yeah, the final corners that Sebastian Rodriguez is in the pit lane still. He will lose several more positions as Jalil, Polo, Pole, Faustino, Brett Gray have all moved up positions, but Alvarez is now moving himself up into third place. He's been up and down the timesheets over the course of the event, but it could play into his favour in the closing stages of this race.
Yeah, Berenguer, the leader, is really struggling to get through these GT cars, through the S's.
Brett Gray is running now in fourth, but Rodriguez is now back out on circuit, so the damage probably wasn't as severe as we first thought. But now he's back out, I believe, 6th place in class, and he's gone off the circuit once again. He's in the sand trap. He's coming back on the circuit. And, ooh, he came back out on the circuit, I believe, in front of Ferranto. Those two are now battling. So that looked a bit dodgy coming back out onto the circuit, but at least there was no collision. But Ferranto has gone a bit wide, so the battle is a bit off now for 6th place in class. Thus far in this race, we've had so much drama into this in this round. The pole sitter Aaron Taruna was out of the race on lap 7 after an incident. Several incidences in the opening stages of this race. Standar Sanel took advantage of the early instances of Aaron Taruna to take the lead, but had to retire on lap 4 of this race. Aaron Taruna followed by close by on lap 7. Gu J-Car was the first of the GTs to retire from this race, followed by Chris Osley in the prototype after an incident which also involved David Daruba. Chris Payne is another driver who's now out of this race. That was one I didn't realise until just now, that he's also out of the race. So that will now be 6 drivers or so out of this race so far.
Yeah, it's been action-packed, and yeah, definitely some big incidences happening throughout the race.
Yeah, exactly right. We've actually getting word that Aaron Taruna wasn't the pole sitter of this race. It was actually Shane Burke, the driver of the... which entry was he driving? He was driving the early risers entry, the American, but from what I've been told, he overslept and missed the start of this race, which is an absolute shame. But hopefully we'll see him in the next round. If you're watching the stream, Steve, good morning to you. Hopefully we can see you in the next round. Hopefully wake up in time, but there's always the next round. That's one of the major facts with this series. We got drivers from all over the world, people from here in Australia, all the way across the world in the US, and everywhere else in between. So we do have quite a large, diverse field, as we do see the BMWs off the circuit once again. Yongji Wong almost having a little incident with Rick Scott, but managed to stay off the circuit to allow him to pass. But out in front still...
Yeah, I'm just looking at Edmund Wong coming up against 2 GT cars on the main straight.
He is
just
making
going into
turn
turn 1.
Progress. He probably be looking. He is about to lap the Ambu Racing entry with Lewis Morano being on board. But the gap looks to have been shortened now as Ascar is now has just gone through turn 7, and Lewis Morano is currently about to head in through 5 and 6. So the gap is now lessening bit more as we are now 12 minutes away from the end of this race. So if Lewis Morano stays out of trouble a bit more, and the chance of Ascar making a slight mistake, this could be a very tough battle coming to the final stages of this race.
Yeah, Edmund Wong's definitely being held up by the BMW of Moreno. He didn't get past him throughout the whole of the S's, so that lost him a bunch of time.
Yeah, it did lose him a lot of time, but he is 2 laps down, which is an absolute shame for him. He has several issues, but that just proves the point where it is very difficult to lap drivers if you're a prototype through the first 7 corners, as it is so tight. The prototype drivers just have to be a bit more patient in those first 7 corners and just wait it out when he gets past the Dunlop curve to start overtaking the GT cars.
So what's the points like with Edmund Wong and Kelvin Wong? Will there be a priority or a change in it for one of the drivers?
Edmund Wong's currently sitting 6th in the championship on 8 points, while Kelvin Wong sitting 6th. But both drivers didn't they both participated in the first round, but they didn't participate in the second round, so they're fair way behind in terms of championship wise. But as it stands, they could be walking away with a few points, but they are quite behind in terms of championship wise, as David Trubar, who was expecting to tie with the championship lead, but it looks like it's not going to be his day. Aaron Taruna is also out of the race, so he'll walk away with no points as well. But Eduardo Del Renko, I think he was meant to be teaming up with Marco Antonio Rodriguez, but I don't think he's hopped into the car this race, and it's looking like he's not going to hop into the car. Well, that will mean Eduardo Del Renko will walk away with some points, which will, I think from my memory, I think it'll walk away with 8 points because he's in 2nd place, so he'll tie with the championship lead with Aaron Taruna, as he's Eduardo Del Renko, as we've mentioned, he was trying to get around his teammate, which is the BMW of Miguel. But championship-wise, Aaron Taruna and Fahed Gafour will still manage to retain the lead, but they will be tied with Eduardo Del Renko for the lead of the championship. But as it stands, I think the other entry of I think Jose, who is currently leading the race, I think this is his first round because it doesn't appear he's on the championship standings. So he will walk away with 10 points for his troubles. So he'll most likely jump somewhere in 8th in the championship potentially. But there is an incident there. Eduardo Del Renko has just had an incident with another driver. I just missed it. We were focusing on the championship, but we didn't realize that Eduardo Del Renko has lost his front wing. So he'll have to make a pit stop. He's in the pits. So this will literally open up the gap for Jose Barengo with 8 minutes left remaining in the session. This could potentially decide the race for Jose unless he makes a mistake at some point on the circuit. But it looks like it's not going well for Eduardo. I'm not sure where he lost. I think he could potentially have lost it on his own somewhere. We will try and find more information on that, but I believe he may have just lost it on his own. He will most likely be going a lap down for his troubles, and he will go a lap down. So this will all but certain allow Jose to basically get the win if it all goes well in the final stages of this race.
Yeah, when he's sitting in the pits, it just feels like eternity, just waiting for that front clip to be bolted back on.
As it looks like he's still running in the pit lane, so it's going to be a lane queue repair for him. He potentially could have lost it on his own, or he could have had some help with another car. But we're not too sure. We missed it, but he's now getting back out on the circuit. He will lose a lap over Jose Barringa, but he will not have as much pressure on Edward Wong sitting in third place, as Edward Wong is another lap behind. But Edward Wong will be pushing a lot harder now, because that will put him nearly on the lead, on the same lap as Recon. But I think Edward Wong just doesn't have enough time left in the race for him to gain back more time and potentially challenge for second.
Yeah, and Eduardo Del Recon is basically coming up to lap Edmund Wong again. So
I believe we've also missed another thing where Luis Moreno has taken the lead of the GT class. That is another thing that's slipped. We have so much action going on the circuit, we've completely missed the fact that Luis Moreno has overtaken Ascar for the lead and has made a big substantial lead. So there must be Mohammed Ascar must have had a major issue or pit stop, and now he's down in second place.
Yeah, last 5 minutes of the race, he's probably just run it out of fuel and had to do a splash and dash.
Potentially, because it just seems too much of a gap for him to have made a major mistake. But he's had a few issues over the course of the race, but not major ones. But this will certainly be a race-deciding moment as Moreno is heading into the spoon and heading onto the back stretch. And Mohammed Asgar is just exiting the S's. So I think Mohammed Asgar could have just made another splash and dash to the end. But as it stands, Jalil has moved up several more positions to get himself into 5th place after Jalil was running so well in this race, but it was an absolute shame for him to have an incident like that, as we are now 5 minutes away from the end of this race. Unless Jose has an incident, the race looks like he'll be taking the prototype and overall win if he doesn't have any more issues, because he will be looking to do another 2-3 laps. He's not under too much pressure to push hard in the final stages of this race, as is Moreno does have a bit of time to take a breather, but it probably most likely won't. But Ascar's going through R31 now, and Moreno's going through the S's, so I think Ascar's going... he maybe not have made a pit stop, but he's trying to conserve his fuel. He probably doesn't have enough to make it to the end.
Yeah, we got Jose Barringa going through the GT field on the into the first corner.
Yeah, that's been a major. At least he's cleared the GT traffic before the S's, so he's not going to lose too much time. But I don't expect him to push too hard in the final stages of this race, as he's got a 1-lap lead over Eduardo Del Renko. But Renko isn't under too much pressure because he will most likely be tying with the championship lead. So he's probably going to be taking the last couple of laps very steadily. He's now probably thinking about the championship. But the battle could be on between the Edmund and Kelvin Wong, as there's not much in it between the two. So a battle for third could still be on the cards between them.
Yeah, Miguel Angel Perez is running wide on a lot of the corners. He's really struggling in the BMW.
Yeah, he's probably conserving those tires, but he's probably just run out of grip. But yeah, he's sliding all over the circuit. But he's running dead last on the running order. So it's an absolute shame. He was been up and down the field for the majority of the race, but the gap has closed down between Edmund Wong and Kelvin Wong. They had to deal with the orange BMW of Yongji Wong. So there isn't much left in it between the two of them. By looking at Kelvin Wong on the screen, they are in the same frame of picture at certain points of the circuit, but they are both into the spoon corner heading onto the back stretch. As you can see, they're in the same frame of shot. They're only about 10 car lengths apart from each other, so it's going to be on for third place, potentially with 2 minutes left to go, potentially 2 laps for Kelvin Wong to catch up to Edmund Wong. Both drivers did have several issues.
Yeah, in this circumstance, do you up the boost and risk not finishing?
I don't know if the Eureka's do have turbos on those cars. Potentially they're powered by Nissan engines, but as Edmund Wong clears the GT traffic with ease, Kelvin Wong will have to contend with that GT in the SSO. That could potentially decide the final place on the grid, as Rick Hyde goes wide on the first corner. He does the right thing and allows the cars to go through, but Kelvin Wong clears the BMW traffic pretty easily, so it could still be on as Edmund Wong clears the BMW of David Plummer pretty well in the S's, as does Kelvin Wong. Anything Edmund Wong does, Kelvin can do just as good in the final stages. We are 1 minute away from the end of this race.
Yeah, he made his way past that Aston Martin mid-corner very well, and he's really...
Oh, it's on! It is on, and the race is now on, and they're colliding. We will be looking, Jose will be crossing the line any second now to take the win, but it is on between Kelvin Wong and Edmund Wong. Edmund Wong takes the place, but Kelvin's coming back. He's got the line, and they're colliding.
Yeah, door-to-door racing without doors.
It's touring car stuff, and Edmund Wong goes off the circuit, and he will lose a lot of time, and he will lose that position to Kelvin Wong, which is an absolute shame. They did have a bit of a collision, but I might suspect that Edmund Wong might give that position back. No, it's not looking like he's going to give that position back. There's just too much of a gap. But Jose Barenga will cross the line to take the win by 1 lap over Eduardo Rinco, who took advantage of the incidences. But the battle is still on between Kelvin and Edmund Wong. But I think the gap is just too much for Edmund Wong to gain back. But Kelvin Wong will look to be crossing the line to take third place. But
Edmund
Wong
Wong's
has gone off the circuit on the final lap in the final corner. That's an absolute shame, but he's got to watch out as Rick Hyde goes through and several other drivers go through. He's going to have to be careful coming back on the circuit. But the checkered flag is out, and Jose Barenga has taken the win. A well-deserved win by Jose Barenga, who stayed out of trouble for the better part of the entire race. Eduardo Del Rinco will cross the line in second, as we see the BMW Yongji Wong getting stuck on the tyre bundle.
Yeah, it's a disappointing way to finish your race.
Luis Morano will cross the line. He's into the final corners of the race, but he will be taking the GT class win as Jose has stopped out on the circuit. Yongji Wong is stuck. Oh, that is an absolute terrible way to end the race.
Paul Faustino and Perel Jallo are fighting on the coming up to the last corner.
Oh, they are too. The battle is still on. Jallo looks to be taking the position. No, it's just not enough.
Can he get the run out of the last corner? No, he's too early on the
looking like he's going to get the run out of the last corner. So Paulo will take 4th place in class, but it was a brilliant effort from Jalou, who started from, which is an absolute shame for him because he started 2nd place on the second or so on the grid and took advantage of the incident with Alexis Calpano at the start. But it was a pit stop error that cost him basically the race for Jalou, but which is an absolute shame for him.
Yeah, great finish for Faustino. That was a well-covered corner.
It appears that Zhongji Wong has retired on the final lap of the race, so it might look like he might not be classified as a finisher because he got stuck on the tyre bundle on the very last corner of the very last lap. It's an absolute shame. He's had a few issues over the course of the race, but overall, it's been an absolutely amazing race. We will try and have a word with several of the drivers because it's the end of the race. Hopefully, we will be trying having a word with several of the race winners, mostly Lewis Morano, who's took a well-deserved win. But as we see Muhammad Azkar lining up on the first corner, most likely to get a photo shot with his teammate as we see Paul Flastino off the circuit, and David Plummer crossing the line to finish in 18th place. So it's been an absolutely amazing race thus far from everyone. Great results from everyone. Mostly a lot of unexpected results from everyone, especially with Aaron Taruna retiring at the start of the race on lap 7.
Yeah, that's it. And so the top 3 finishes for the P2: Jose Berenguer, Eduardo Del Ricon, and Kelvin Wrong rounding out the top 3. And the GT field, Paul.
That's exactly right. They get the win. As we are, I'm looking to get a few more, get a couple of words from several of the drivers. It was an interesting event. A lot of unexpected results from a lot of people. It's been actually a very weird round. It was just as chaotic as the second round. Mazzano was a very chaotic race in itself, but I think this has topped the list even further as we just didn't know what else was going to happen in this race.
Mazzano was totally different to this race with the rain to start with. So, yeah, definitely. I didn't expect having a car in the middle of the track when I was coming up to the back of it.
Exactly. But a well-deserved win from Lewis Morano and Alexis Clapano, who started on pole and dropped basically to the back of the pack, but they worked hard to move themselves into a position and take the GT win after Sebastian Rodriguez had a coming together with Zhongji Wong in the orange BMW, I'm sorry. But joining us in a second will be Rick Hyde to give us a take on what happened in the race for him. Bear with us as we will, don't go away, as we will be joined by several drivers for a word. Joining us right about now is Rick Hyde. Welcome.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Good, thanks. How did your race go for you?
I think it went a lot better than expected. This is my first race. This is my rookie race. I've never done a race like this before. I think I started off at 11th, so to come home 6th, I think that was well above expectation. I just wanted to come home in one piece.
Yeah, always good to have the Kiwis on track as well.
Yes.
You did stay out of trouble for a majority of the race. You did have a few issues, but overall, being at your first race, you did amazingly well. We do hope to see you moving forward in the final couple of rounds of the championship.
Yeah, thanks. No, thanks for the guys to invite me in. I realised setup was the biggest thing. I actually, when I started the race, I actually had 44 laps of fuel, hard tyres, everything. I put everything on slow, and I think everyone's about 4 or 5 seconds a lap faster. But at my first stop, I changed to a free stop strategy and started only being a couple of seconds behind everyone. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next race. I just need the pace, keep up with the guy at the front.
Mm-hmm. Well, once again, absolutely amazing effort from you to finish in 6th place. I'd like to thank Rick Hyde for joining us in the commentary.
Thanks, guys.
That was Rick Hyde, one of the newbie drivers who joined us for his first round. He did an amazing effort to finish in 6th place from...
top drive, especially 6th spot is in this grueling race. 2.4 hours on your own is a killer race.
Exactly. Several drivers, I don't believe, made a driver change, including the race winner, Jose. I don't think he made a driver change himself, but a lot of teams didn't make driver swaps, which was very surprising on my part. I was expecting a lot more driver swaps for this event, but it turns out that that wasn't the case.
It's also good to see that he's start off on the hard tyres, and I just used the soft tyre the whole way through the race, so I was pitting a lot more. But hard tyre, different strategies. Ended up getting 6th spot, so good race for Hyde.
Joining us shortly will be Paul Flastino from the race to give us his insight into how he went in the race. So join us in a couple of seconds as we will be discussing on his point of view from the race for the event. But joining us now is Paul Flastino. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Could you give us an insight into how the race went for you?
It was an intense race. I missed my stop. I had to pit second time. And sorry about that orange Porsche earlier in the race. So and later in the race, battling with Jalu, it was intense really. I had to manage my tires.
Yeah, because that was an absolutely amazing battle between the two of you coming down to the final lap of the race, where Jalil just didn't quite make it stick up. That allowed you to retain that position and give yourself a good result.
I was hoping the race will be over, but there was one more lap, so I had to stick.
That's exactly right. But that will give you a good result for today. I think it was 6th or so. I think it was. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, sorry, no idea. I just saw I'm 10th place.
Oh, yep, 10th place. That's right. So that will, I think that well, there was a good result on your part, and hopefully you'll be able to have more success in the coming Cup final rounds.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm really tired.
Thank you for coming to give us a word on your thoughts on the race.
Yeah, thank you as well.
That was Paul Fastino from Garun Dex. I apologize if I mispronounced the name of the team. But the number 19 Porsche finished a very decent position after having a very tough battle with Jalul in the closing stages of this race. Hopefully we'll be having a few more words. I'm trying to hopefully get a word with Luis Morano to give us his thoughts on the race at hand. But Chris, how did you find the race overall?
Yeah, it was great racing. Nice close race with the GTE field. P2, it sort of opened up for Jose Berenguer with the a couple of issues with pit stops and lap traffic. But it's great to see some big gains from Mohamed Fitzriaska as well in the GTE field, up 16 spots to finish in second in the GTEs. Just phenomenal effort for some of the drivers.
Yeah, especially it was very challenging. race, and especially in the GT class where it was highly competitive. We did have Lewis Morano and Alexis Clepano starting on pole, but having their issues. But I'm getting word that Lewis Morano will be joining us shortly for a word on his version of events after this race. But he was running very well. He did start low after Alexis Clepano handed the car over, but he managed to work his way up into the top two and battling with Sebastian Rodriguez for the lead of the race. But that incident with Rodriguez and the orange BMW of Yong, that did cost Rodriguez the lead and the win in the GT class.
Yeah, that's it. And it's from quite a few drivers obviously having a few issues down the very bottom with some DNFs. We only had 6 DNFs or 7 DNFs throughout the whole race, including Yongji Wong, who finished up on the last lap, unfortunately. But yeah, it's out of a big field. That's not a lot of cars, and a lot of the drivers have actually managed to do all the laps.
Joining us now is the GT class winner from Ambu Racing, Lewis Morano. Welcome, Lewis.
Hello, good evening.
Lewis, after a bit of a terrible start from the Ambu Racing BMW, Alexis Clepano did fight back and moving up a few positions to hand you the car. How did that final stint go for you?
Final stint was like just pushing like hell. I mean, as soon as I took my stint, I tried to get into the groove as quickly as possible and then just charge through, tried to catch up with the leaders. And then as soon as I caught up with Sebastian, I got held up a bit. Almost got had a major spin once, but was able to recover. And then he had an incident with another back marker, and then after that, I just went flat out. Managed my engine boost just to catch up with Victory for the lead, and then he pitted. So I'm not sure what happened. And then when he pitted, I just brought it home and all the way to the checkered flag.
Well, it was an absolutely well-deserved win for Ambu Racing. This is their third win of the season. The championship points-wise is looking well more in your favour per race. Are you excited towards the end of the season?
Of course, we're looking very strong towards the season, and then one more 2.4-hour race, and then and then there's this 6-hour race, which is going to be one heck of a battle up ahead. But still, anything can happen, and all we have to do is just keep our best, keep in good shape, and just keep it clean all throughout the remainder of the season.
So where do you see the big gains for the BMW in comparison with the other cars?
I think that I've noticed that I'm gaining much in the high-speed sections, especially in the SS. I noticed that Sebastian in the SS section, he was braking while I was just taking it, like just lifting off the throttle. And then pretty much that's it, mostly in the high-speed sections.
Well, whatever you guys have been doing with the car, you've been doing the absolute stellar job in setting up the car for each of the circuits that we've been going to for all the rounds of the Endurance Series. We want to wish you the best of luck for the rest of the championship, and hopefully you could be in a place where you could actually take the championship win.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for coming, Lewis, and the best of luck to you for the rest of the championship.
Thank you. See you guys again soon.
That was Lewis Morano, the driver of the Ambu Racing BMW, who Alexis Clepano started the race, but had issues in the opening laps, and both drivers, Clepano and Morano, pulled off stellar stints to finish the race in first place, to go from dead last in the class to winning the class. Is an absolutely amazing effort from him. Could you give us your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, it's the GTE field's definitely tight in the championship points at the moment. So, once we get the results for this round confirmed, hopefully Louis Moreno and Alexis Capano will be streets ahead of everyone else in the GTE field. They're just super consistent in that BMW.
Yeah, they made their several issues, but they were able to take advantage of the incidences in the race for them to put themselves back in a position where they can still take that win.
Yeah, Fitzriaska, I think he had that splash and dash in the Porsche, which also assisted the BMW to get that first spot as well. So, we'll have to see how he goes in the next round.
Yeah, exactly. Joining us right now, we are joined by Jared, who did a stellar job in the number 23 Chevrolet Corvette. Welcome.
Hey guys.
Could you give us a quick brief rundown of how you felt the race went for you?
Well, it was quite interesting. We had a very, very poor qualifying, so we're starting quite far at the back of the grid. Our initial first stint was actually quite surprising. We were quite quick. We escaped a couple of incidents. Our strategy probably did not work to our favor, but that's our own fault for the setup being very bad on tire wear. So we were really, really happy to sort of get the positions we got. So we got 8th, I think. But yeah, no, sort of just a quiet race. There was a few good battles. Yeah, nothing really interesting, to be honest.
Well, it was an absolutely amazing effort. Chris?
Yeah, you said, or you touched on the tyre wear issue, which was just mainly the front tyres that were going off throughout the duration of the race?
Oh yes, definitely. Our mediums were lasting 25 laps, the fronts. We were able to double stint with the rears, so we got 50 out of the rears, but yeah, 25 at the front, and we gambled on running softs in the last stint for 13, 14 laps, but I was pushing way too hard to try and catch the others, and my front right was down at 50% after 4 laps, so we were very slow at the end.
And how was the balance with the tyres with the mediums on the front and the double stinted softs on the rear?
First lap was pretty difficult. Suffered with a bit of oversteer, but it actually balanced out really nicely, and I think I set my fastest medium lap on the used mediums, so it sort of came back to me, which was nice.
Oh, excellent.
Because you were running quite well all day, running in the mix of it all, and being in a potential position to take the lead of the GT class. But it was an absolutely brilliant effort from you, and we hope to see more good results in the future races.
Yeah, no, definitely. We had some really great battles out there today, and our strategy worked for the first half of the race. But yeah, second half we sort of faded away a bit.
Well, thank you, Jared, for joining us on that to give us a word on your thoughts of the race.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thank you for broadcasting, and yeah, thanks, guys.
Exactly. Thanks. Well, it was an absolutely amazing race. I can give it an overall rating.
Yeah, so what was your pick driver of the race?
I'd have to say my driver of the day had to be Jose. For taking advantage of the start of taking advantage of the incidents at the start of the race and maintaining that lead, he's probably my pick of the prototype class. But overall, I have to choose the Ambu Racing squad of both Luis Morano and Alexis Capano, after Capano had that incident at the start of the race, but managed to make their way through and take the GT win.
Yeah, it's always good to see the that comeback and overtake for the class lead with 5 minutes to go in the race.
Exactly right. But I think coming to the final couple of rounds, it's going to be very tight in the championship for the prototypes, but less so for the GTs, as this is the third win for Ambu Racing in the GT class.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, I'd like to see like the Y-Lab Porsche or some of the Aston Martins claw back some of the ground that the M3's got at the moment.
Well, Chris Osley, thank you for joining us in the commentary booth. Hopefully, I can see you in the commentary booth more often.
Yeah, too easy. I'd like to stay in the race a bit longer though, but yeah, we'll see how the next races pan out.
Exactly right. Thank you for joining us, Chris, on the live stream.
Yeah, thanks again, and thanks to Gorn Servers as well, doing a fantastic job up there.
We also like to credit to, well, not just Gorns, but also Chris Payne for organising the series to ensure that everything runs smoothly and organised as well. And the series can't run without the donators such as Mark Robertson, Chris Payne, and so many people that have donated to the cause of making sure this series runs and is competitive for everyone. And more importantly, a big thanks to all the participants, all the teams who have taken the time to compete today and every other round of the RF2 Asia Series. So next weekend, I believe, will be the next round of the McLaren 650S GT3 Cup. So hopefully everyone will be able to join us for that. I'm excited for it. I've been Lachlan Andrews, joined by Chris Osley as well. And until next time, bye for now.